What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? Hey everyone, a quick warning before we get into this one. Due to the natures of the stories, there is some mention of child abuse. If that's something you don't want to hear, this is your warning to click away now. But now, on with the video. When I was in high school, a friend asked me and two other friends to his house for dinner. His mom served homemade bean soup, which was very good. Toward the end of the main course, she brought out chocolate cake for dessert. She cut each of us a slice and plopped it into our bowls, in which we still had about an inch of soup. Us guests exchanged puzzled glances, but the family dug right in, so apparently chocolate cake soaked in bean soup was an ordinary thing for them. Story 2. My childhood best friend lived with his grandparents. His grandfather was a clockmaker. He mostly restored them. Their large two-story house walls were covered in old restored grandfather and cuckoo clocks. Each one had a small sticker with a number so he could keep track of them all. The highest number I saw was over 700. I would say 25% of them were wound, so every hour you were treated to a symphony of clocks. I didn't appreciate it when I was a kid, but those clocks were fantastic pieces of workmanship. Story 3. This happened when I was like 6. I needed to use the bathroom at a friend's house and he led me to his parents' bathroom. The place was filled with crap of all sorts. Boxes, magazines, an inflatable pool, lots of other stuff. You could barely get in there. He pulled out a drawer from the installed cabinet by the entryway and said to pee in there. I thought he was joking, until he went ahead and peed in there himself. I couldn't argue with that, so I too peed right in there. Then he shut the drawer and we went and played more Ninja Turtles. I have no idea what became of that drawer or house or family. I hope that that kid is doing all right. I'm no mental health expert, but something about all of that sounds wrong. I'm sure the pee drawer will be talked about in therapy. Story 4. One of the first times I met my husband's family, I was over at their house and husband gestured for me to sit down and be comfortable. Their house was really very cluttered. Not quite hoarder cluttered, but close. They had a couple of couches facing each other and then some chairs. Not knowing the rules, I sat on one of the couches, which had a lot of stuffed teddy bears on it. Oh my god, you would have thought I sat down on live bears. There were probably 20 to 30 small/medium stuffed bears on this couch. Husband's mother and twin brother both visibly reacted as if I had damaged the bears. Not antique bears either. That was when I was told the couch was for the bears, and only for the bears. No one was allowed to sit on the bears' couch, just the bears. The bears all had little beaded necklaces with their names on them to tell them apart because they were all the same brand and style. Story 5. So when I was younger, my dad died. My mom remarried and had 2 kids. I was moved into the basement, unfinished basement. I didn't think anything of it since I was 10. I had a sheet blocking my area from the laundry area. It had bare concrete walls, wood beams, and piping across the ceiling and cement flooring. Used a heater and dehumidifier because it was cold and humid. When I used the heater, my parents would make my sheeted area around the bed so it would heat up the space quicker. Parents didn't allow any of my friends over and my brother and sister weren't allowed in my room. Distant family members also never stayed over, and when we had family gatherings, I was told to go into the guest room instead of my room while they were there. I thought, cool, I have a huge room and no one can mess it up. My family would go on vacations yearly without me from when I was 12 till I was 18. I was the dog and house watcher. During one of those vacations when I was 17, I invited a friend to come over. They pointed out how screwed up it was that there were bedrooms fully furnished with TVs for my brother and sister, a guest room fully furnished as well with a TV, and how I was in the basement with sheets for walls and bathroom mats on the floor. I completely dismissed it because it was normal to me. It wasn't until I was 20 that I found out the family trips that I didn't go on were paid for with money I was getting from my dad passing away. I'm sure I got some of the money in food and clothes and whatever I needed, but it's got me pretty screwed up, because my brother and sister don't have any memory of it, and when I talk about it, they always back my parents up by saying we were raised right, and I opted out of vacations. They also thought the guest room was my room. Edit. I just wanted to thank everyone for being so kind and welcoming with your thoughts. This whole day has been way more emotional than I ever could have expected. Thank you, everyone. You all deserve the world. Oh, this was probably not a super fun realization to come to, huh? You were like borderline neglected. Also, they could steal your dad's inheritance money from you? Like, I don't know how else to say it. Bro, that sucks. Screw those parents. Story 6. I didn't see this happen, thank freaking God, but here's the story. I'd recently moved to a new town before my freshman year, little crap hole in Kansas, and I made a few good acquaintances, but was still learning who's interesting and who isn't, etc. This one kid, I don't remember his name, seemed cool. He was into video games and stuff, and we hit it off. Ended up hanging out at school off and on, etc. So one day he asks if I want to come over after school, and I couldn't for some reason, probably work, I don't remember. He says to me, "That's fine, I'm sure my neighbor will come over and we'll end up watching movies and touching ourselves anyway." I laughed, thinking he was being facetious or whatever, but he doesn't. He does not laugh. Looks at me and turns his head a bit. "I'm serious. My dad's friend comes over and we watch movies and touch ourselves. I thought you might want to." I did not continue the conversation. I never spoke to him again, and I also never said a thing about it to anyone. Looking back, though, I wish I had. Pretty sure that dude was being abused, and looking back and knowing what I know now, the fact he was so matter-of-fact about it, I'd bet money it had been happening for most of his life. Freaking terrible. Story 7. I was maybe 12 and visiting a friend who lived deep in the woods for the first time. They had 2 outdoor dogs, and one got free and ran over and attacked the other. The dog that got bit was quite a bit smaller and was definitely injured. My friend's dad came out with a pistol and shot both dogs. It changed my life forever. I was raised in a house where dogs are family. My friend and his family didn't seem fazed at all. Edit. I'll elaborate a little more. This happened around 94. I grew up in an extremely rural town, so when I say my friend lived deep in the woods, I'm talking they were completely off the grid backwoods. One of the dogs was my friend's, and the other was his sister's. They were chained up outside 24/7 and not treated as pets at all. I believe the logic behind the shooting was the sister's dog was too injured to recover, and my friend's dog had murdered his sister's dog, so it was only fair to shoot them both. About half an hour after the whole thing happened, we all ate dinner together like nothing happened. My parents picked me up shortly after and I cried the entire way home. We only hung out at my house after that. Story 8. I remember asking my mom how come she didn't like me like my friends' moms liked their girls. I told her they always hugged and talked to each other and laughed, and said I love you multiple times throughout the day. I was 10. My mom rolled her eyes at me and went to her room. I tried and tried to be close to her until I was about 16. I finally realized she didn't give a crap about being close to me. She was very affectionate and close to my brothers and a little sister. After she realized I didn't care anymore, she started to make an effort. I'm extremely lucky for my dad, though. He was there for anything and everything. Later on, I realized she was extremely jealous and hated that my dad doted on me. Story 9. When I was younger, I was best friends with 2 brothers from Jamaica. One of the days they asked me to stay over so we could play some Atari after we finished playing outside. We came home 12 minutes after their curfew, and their dad, who was extremely calm, told us to sit in the living room. I sat in there with my 2 friends and they were super quiet, which was a bit weird, until their dad walked in with a belt and beat the living crap out of them. I crapped myself, not literally, because I thought I was in for a beating, but he didn't hit me, which was a huge relief. After the beating, their dad, asked if I would like some carrot juice while my friends just went back to normal and set up their Atari like nothing happened. I was sat on the sofa wondering what the hell just went on. Story 10. I'll be the weird family, although this doesn't quite fit the normal since no one thought it was normal. I was about 12 or 13 and I had a huge zit on my butt that was incredibly painful and it was deep under the skin. I couldn't pop it no matter what, and in my extreme pain sitting down, I asked my dad to pop it. He said, "All right," and I took my pants and bent over. My dad then puts on gloves to pop the zit. Anyway, in the middle of all this, my friend's sister, a girl at 10 or 11, walks in on us at full speed as we were behind a wall that connects the hall sector to the living room, so she was real close. She gasps and walks out of the room. Yeah, there we go. And yes, it popped. One of those water-containing zits that causes a lot of pain. Edit. Some people are confused. The dad helping isn't the weird part. The weird part is a little girl coming over to a friend's house and finding a grown man, dad, both hands on a naked bent-over son's butt up close. Our living room is on level 2/3 of our house, and you can hear people coming from the stairs up into the hallway, except this time, the door was closed, and we didn't hear her until she burst into the room. I was about 11 or 12, and my sister was 9. Oh, also, my grandma told us once she used to eat chicken crap as a kid, as well as pieces of walls along with other kids. Ain't the half of what I've seen there. Like dead worms in my food. Story 11. I celebrated Christmas with my high school girlfriend's family one year. It was her mother's turn to open her presents, and she opened one from her daughter, then one from her other daughter, then finally one from her husband. Then her husband started pulling tiny hidden gifts for his wife from everywhere. Earrings from the couch cushions, necklaces, bracelets, a bag of candy, and flowers. He had at least a dozen presents hidden everywhere from behind the curtains, in a lampshade, behind the TV, in a closet. They just kept coming, and he had the biggest grin on his face. When he was done, he wished her a Merry Christmas, told her he loved her, and kissed her right on the mouth in front of me. It was wonderful, but extremely weird to me. It wasn't until that display of love and joy for his wife that I realized I had never once seen my own parents act the least bit affectionate towards each other, that I had never heard them say I love you to each other. That's when I realized it was my family that was weird. It wasn't until that display of love for his wife that I realized that it was manly to be romantic and to show love and affection. Her parents were wonderful people, and I will always regard them as role models. I hope they're doing well all these years later. Story 12. Was sleeping over at a friend's house in 6th grade. 3 p.m. we show up to her house after school. We walked into her apartment to find her mom, half-dressed, passed out drunk, and sprawled out with her head on the floor, one arm twisted weirdly so it was somehow resting on the coffee table, and her legs on the couch. TV was on and blaring. Didn't even notice our arrival. I had zero experience with this kind of thing, and although I could tell my friend was embarrassed, I didn't understand the full implications or really what was happening. I pretty much thought, oh, that's a weird place for a nap, which is how I explained it to my parents later when I commented on how odd it was to be napping there instead of in the bed. I might have even asked them if they would let me sleep on the couch and watch TV too. Bless my parents for immediately understanding the situation but not making a scene, and not spoiling my naivete or ever embarrassing my friend in any way. My family is pretty good at being subtle, for better or worse. However, that was absolutely the last time I stayed at her house. All sleepovers with that particular friend were at my house from then on. But it was a casual coincidence from my POV. I didn't even notice that subtle change for a couple of years. Looking back, I think my friend really appreciated it though. We're still friends and she has kids of her own and she's doing great, is a doctor. But her mom still has the same alcohol struggles and is very in your face about it even now as she was then. Shout out to your parents. OP's right. I think they absolutely did the right thing by not spoiling your naivete or anything, especially not embarrassing your friend because, hey, your friend did not ask for that. And I feel like a lot of people would sort of embarrass your friend. Maybe not intentionally, but they would. So, well done, OP's parents. Story 13. Here's an I was that family story. My godmother, who is practically an aunt, ran a fairly successful daycare out of her home in the 90s. She was a first-generation immigrant to the US whose parents came to the New England area from Ireland. My 2 younger brothers and I spent a lot of time at her home, and I was generally the oldest child there. When I was about 8 years old, she started to have me make her favorite drink, gin and tonic. Oh, she drank these all day while running her daycare. At age 8, I knew how to mix cocktails, that forks were better for stirring than spoons, and that large plastic bottles of gin were cheap and low quality. This went on for years on pretty much a daily basis until my family moved out west. My godmother kept her daycare running until she died. I'm sure of health problems relating to alcohol. I was 15 when she passed, and I'm in my 30s now. I honestly went most of my life thinking nothing of it until I became a father a couple of years ago, at which point I was like, how the hell did anyone let her have a daycare? Side note, I drink, but would consider myself an average drinker if not below average. With that said, I could never stomach the thought of gin and didn't try gin until I was 30. This was because I once licked my finger, early in my daycare bartending career, after a couple drops of gin splashed on my hand as I was pouring. That plastic half-gallon quality gin was the worst thing I've ever had in my life, and I have no idea how my godmother liked it so much. Completely ruined my taste for gin at 8. Story 14. My family were very comfortable, and my mom always babysat a lot of kids from around the neighborhood. Basically, her place was just where the kids hung out. Once there was an emergency with my dad, and my mom really needed somebody to watch me overnight. I wound up with one of the families she babysat for. They were really nice people, and I was close friends with their kids, obviously, because, hey, they were at my house every day. It was a new experience, though. This was the first time I had ever seen people living in real poverty. I was kind about it and didn't say anything, but parts of it were a real shock to me. The toilet didn't work, but they had just continued to use it to the point where it piled up to the seat. We had to unscrew the light bulb to turn off the lights because the switch would shock you if you touched it. I felt really bad for them. It was just a real eye-opener for me as a kid, and it gave me a much better understanding of exactly why my mom babysat and fed all those kids. Well, OP, I can only hope that the people around were very grateful for what your mom did. It sounds like someone in a privileged situation using that privilege for good. which is always really nice to hear. I'm sure getting that bit of perspective early on in your life was helpful too. So I bet you turned out alright. Story 15. When I was in about first grade, my best friend at the time had a lot of temper tantrums. We were having a sleepover and I fell asleep in her bedroom. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a different bed with her father. I was so confused, but he explained she had a temper tantrum and her mom went to sleep in her bed with her, so they moved me to the guest room. I was young and didn't understand that's not normal that he was sleeping in the same bed as me, just him and me. I told my parents when I went home the next day and they were extremely concerned, asking me if he touched me, etc. I was confused because my pure innocent mind didn't understand the concept of that. Now as an adult I'm like, why didn't they just move me to the other room? Why did the dad have to get in bed with me? They're truly good people. Nothing happened. Just weird. Story 16. My friend invited me to sleep over, and the next morning we were eating and talking with her mom. Her mom asks if she wants to prank dad again, and my friend's all, yes, he was so mad. I thought maybe they had swapped shampoo with a Nair or something, so I regrettably asked what they did last time. It turned out they had tied string around his chicken while he was passed out from pain meds and woke him up by tying the string to the bedroom doorknob and slamming the door. My friend was a 9-year-old girl and her mom got her in on that. Doing it at all was screwed up, but you're gonna put your kid in the mix? They assured me they messed with him like that all the time. It was fine. Took a hard pass on staying over again because I did not want to know what they tied a string to for a sleeping girl, or what other crap I might walk in on. Story 17. I've got one from the opposite perspective. So, to paint the picture, I invited a few people over for my 10th birthday party. The plan was a sleepover with video games and board games. Sounded great to my nerdy friends and I. Well, the day of the party comes along and one of my friends gets dropped off by the school bus with me. We walk inside and there's no pizza yet and the cake hasn't even been picked up. I ask my dad and he starts screaming about how my mom will pick them up on her way home from work. She won't be home until 7 p.m. at the earliest, and my friends will be arriving around 4. After my friend and I left the room, my friend, from now referred to as Mark, not his real name, asked me if something was wrong and why my dad was so mad. It was normal for him to be that mad when he forgot something. The rest of my friends show up around 4. Friends Bill, Bob, and Frank, also not their names. I offer them fruit snacks when they arrive and tell them pizza should be here around 7:30. So we're taking turns on Gran Turismo 4 when Bill asks if my parents are home. He would like to meet them. I tell him my dad's home, but he's sleeping right now as he gets up kinda early. This was a lie. He was taking his medicine. What I would later, that evening, find out was H, and he would be occupied for a while, and that my mom would be getting out of work around 7 p.m., which was true. The lie seemed to work and we continued playing games. 8 p.m. rolls around and my mom gets home. She has no pizza or cake. I greet her when she comes into the living room. She asks us if we ate the pizza and cake already. I tell her that dad told us she would be getting them. She asked where my dad was, so I told her their bedroom. She said she'd be right back and went to their bedroom. It wasn't long before you could hear them clearly screaming at each other. I noticed that them arguing was making my friends uncomfortable, but I was unfazed. It was then that I realized what was going on wasn't normal. I felt awful. I told my friends that my parents would likely be arguing most of the night and if they wanted to go home, I'd understand. They all wanted to go home. Due to the layout of the home, the kitchen was closer to the bedrooms than the living room, and that was where the phone was. So I went with each of my friends to the kitchen so they could call their parents to be picked up. The front door was also closer still. They each took turns calling their parents. I had to talk to Frank's parents for him as he was too shaken up by what was going on. All the parents were there within the hour and picked up my friends. Mark was the last one to be picked up, and he asked if I wanted to hang out at his place for the night. I told him if my parents found out I left without telling anyone, especially if I didn't leave a note saying where, they would be even more angry. And I told him that I couldn't leave a note saying where I was going as I didn't want to have his parents dragged into it. We hugged and left. My parents finished screaming at each other around 11 p.m. when my dad left screaming about going to his buddy's place for the weekend. I was reading a book in the living room when my mom walked in and saw that everything was put away and all my friends were gone. She asked me where they went. I'll never forget the pain in her eyes when I said they each called their parents and went home already. For what I thought was normal, I thought everyone's parents argued endlessly. I thought everyone had a parent they lied for. I thought everyone's parents lied to them constantly. I thought everyone's parents got angry at them without prompting. I thought everyone always looked for exits upon entering a new place. I thought everyone knew how to act without being seen. I thought everyone knew how to act under pressure. I haven't celebrated a birthday since, or even tried. I feel no drive to celebrate, as all it does is remind me of that and many other horrible things around that time. I'm still friends with Mark all these years later. He's one of my only friends, and he's by far my closest. I hope that OP one day finds the ability to celebrate a birthday again. I don't know, as simple as it sounds, I feel like it would be freeing for them almost if they got to a point where they could do that. And hey, maybe they just won't like birthdays their whole life anyway. Fair enough. Don't want to do anything big. There's plenty of people like that. But I hope OP at least gets to a place where they feel like it's an option. Because really, no one deserves to have these feelings surrounding a time that's supposed to be a celebration. Shout out to Mark though. He's a real one. Story 18. Scene: small southern town. When I was probably like 10 or 12-ish, a friend had a big sleepover for our friend group. Probably 12 to 15 dudes. We were mostly jock/preppy kind of kids. Future frat boy types. Upper middle class with some rich kids sprinkled in. Host kid is a recent marriage stepson of a chiropractor. His mom was a bit trashy. Anyway, we start to arrive and we're bullcrapping around their place and making plans for mischief for the night. Host assures us that we can do whatever we want because his mom and stepdad are going out on a nighttime bicycle ride all night. No, that's not what was going down at all. The parents come out in full-blown BDSM slave gear, leather daddy zippers and crap. Stepdad didn't have the head part fully zipped up, but mom was being led by a leash. Right in front of us. He said a few kind words instructing us to behave for the night, led mom to the car, and drove off. After a moment of stunned silence, we then had a big group argument about what the hell we just saw. Host, who thought this was perfectly normal, assured us it was just a biking thing. We didn't know everything, but we knew enough to call bullcrap on that. But a half hour later, it was behind us, and we proceeded with normal tween boy stuff, playing Night Wars outside in the woods/yard. Edit. For those asking, Night Wars is probably a weird term, but it's what we used. Basically, it was a catch-all term for tween boys running around the neighborhood unsupervised all night. Usually, the boys would separate into groups of various sizes or sometimes just divide in half. We would play games or pranks or just go exploring in the woods. Water balloon fights, TPing houses and yards, egging mailboxes, paintball fights. I could probably think of more. A Night Wars night would be declared in advance, and then we would work out the details, or not, later. This was late 80s, early 90s in a small town with basically zero crime, if that helps clarify why a bunch of kids would be allowed to roam around all night like that. Story 19. Growing up in rural East England, had a friend who lived on a working farm. They had the stereotypical big English farmhouse. Lovely old place. No flat floors or straight walls anywhere. Anyway, downstairs was an interesting layout. They had a room that was almost hidden away that you could easily miss unless you knew it was there or noticed it from the outside. So this room, I only ever went in once, maybe twice in many years of being friends and going over to their house quite a lot, was their Christmas room. It has decorations up all year round, and during the year when they bought presents, they'd wrap them and just put them in the room and leave them there until Christmas. It was awesome in a sense, though. A whole room for this is great. Often when it got to Christmas time, they'd forgotten what something was that they got for another family member. Story 20. When I was 15, I was doing this nature program over the summer. I made friends with one of the girls there. We hit it off really well. When we found out we lived near each other, she invited me over for a sleepover. Her family was cool and I didn't have any issues until later on. I had to use the bathroom and asked where it was. The mom told me they were having a little problem with the toilet. I didn't think anything of it until I went and saw the toilet. It didn't work at all. They just had a plastic bag in it. There was so much crap, pee, and even used pads in it. It was just there for everyone to see. I almost started gagging. I don't know how long they kept the bag there, but it smelled awful. Everyone there acted like it was a casual thing. Till this day, I never found out if it ever got fixed. Story 21. Does the most horrifically filthy place you have ever seen humans live in count as weird? I had a pal I'd known from middle school. I went to see him 6 years after graduation. He was living with someone and they had a kid, and all of them lived in a little 2-bedroom place. I get there and the smell hits me at the door. The carpet had been some kind of shag, but matted down to just stuff. The kitchen had a sheet over the doorway. I could not believe my eyes. All the surfaces in the place were just caked with the dishes, glasses, boxes, etc. I couldn't and didn't look too long. See, all of it was covered in a thick, green, fuzzy mold. The sink had standing water covered with a blanket of mold. I was in there for all of 4 seconds. After I came out of there, I asked to use the restroom. Big mistake. The sink, tub, and toilet were black. Sink due to hair dye, tub due to filth and black slime, and the toilet was the same. The area between the tub, toilet, and sink was jammed full of what I think had been towels, but they had sat rotting and growing slime. It was just a big, smelly lump of horror. There was no way I was going to chance something hopping onto my dong if I tried to pee in there. Their poor kid slept on a mattress on the floor in a nearly bare room with just a sheet and blanket. The hallway right outside the kids' room had a bare bulb that was being swarmed by bugs. And yes, CPS was called. I don't get how people live in these situations. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I'm pretty lucky. I grew up in a pretty clean, cleanly sort of environment. But this sounds like egregiously bad. As in, I think after I record this, I'm gonna go clean my bathroom bad. Story 22. There were a couple of nerdy twins in my 6th grade class named Steve and Lee. They dressed poorly and their hygiene was awful. All of my friends picked on them ruthlessly, but I wasn't brought up that way, so I treated them kindly. Lee one day said that he wanted to invite me over and hang out, and I couldn't say no. Their house was right on my paper route, so one day I stopped by. Their parents were weird and creepy. Both were lawyers, yet their house was stale and dank. Whilst in Jim and Lee's bedroom, they pulled out a couple of Playboy magazines. Jim told me their dad bought them a subscription. I knew even as a 12-year-old that this was whack, but I also secretly thought it was pretty cool. Lee then told me their dad made them go into the bathroom with them and touch themselves every day. Jim quickly got upset and told Lee that he wasn't supposed to tell people that. I was really creeped out and left pretty quickly. I had to interact with their dad a few times in the ensuing year since their house was on my route, and I had to collect money every month. He never left a tip. Story 23. So this is unusual because it was an adult friendship, but I've always thought it was weird. I went over to my now ex's parents' house while I was getting to know him. His parents live in one of those gated golf course communities. Big retiree house, very nice. I made him dinner and then realized they didn't have a trash can inside the house. There was a small recycling bin in the pantry, a good 30 feet from the stove, fridge, and sink, and 2 giant trash cans in the garage. I asked him about it, like, where was I supposed to put vegetable peels or food packaging? He fetched a grocery bag from the pantry, collected the detritus, and then threw it away outside. There were also no trash cans in their bathrooms, so I'm really glad I never went over there on my period. He said it kept things, quote, more sanitary? But all I could think was what a huge hassle it was to have to haul out to the garage every time I needed to throw anything away. Story 24. Many years ago, I went to a barbecue being thrown by my neighbors. I was in 1st grade or so. I don't remember exactly why I went alone, so young, but I recall my parents at the time trusted the next door neighbor lady to look after me, as she had daughters around my age. I remember she was very sweet and invited me to this cookout she was hosting. Side note, I was raised in a religion that forbade the consumption of pork products. Having been born in the United States, I was aware that I ate differently than other kids, but at that age I was still working out the nuances. Neighbor.
Ready for your hamburger, dear?
Young me.
No, thank you. I'm not supposed to eat ham.
Honey, it's all right. I already asked your mom. It's okay for you to have this. It's not pork. Tiny me, confused.
But cheeseburger means burger with cheese. A hamburger must mean burger with ham. I can't have that.
It's just a name. It means a cheeseburger without cheese. There's no pork, I promise.
Then why is it called a hamburger?
Unfortunately for me, it would be a few years before I learned that the sandwich in question apparently originated in the city of Hamburg, Germany, which is why the goddamn thing is called a hamburger. Like a Danish, I guess. Having raised kids herself, she saw the meltdown coming, and was nice enough instead to fill me up with corn on the cob, salad, and coleslaw. So at least I didn't go hungry due to my utter stupidity. No use arguing gastronomic linguistics with a 6-year-old, can't say I blame her. I remember having an otherwise lovely time. Oh, OP, this has to be the cutest story in here so far. No, like, childhood trauma, no child abuse or anything, just a little misunderstanding. I don't think it necessarily answers the prompt, but the story is so cute. And hey, I get that. Kid logic dictates a hamburger should have ham. Fair enough. Story 25. I was sleeping over at a friend's house. Her whole house was a mess and it smelled like the concentrated essence of ashtray. We went upstairs to make the bed and there was this sort of storage room with a mattress with brown stains on it. She said I'd be sleeping on that. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Also, she didn't give me any sheets or a pillow and there was mouse crap on the ground. I was so flabbergasted that I did not do or say anything. But if that were to happen to me now, I would just go home. Also, one time, this same girl was complaining to me that her parents don't clean their kitchen very well, and that her dad took the blender cup from the blender and there was a lot of nasty stuff underneath it. Sometime later, she invited me over for dinner. I said I wasn't interested. She wanted to know the reason, so I told her what she said had put me off. She was upset at me, but I was like, you were complaining about this though? So you agree with me? I don't get it. Story 26. In high school, I had a friend whose family was a nudist. First time I went over, he warned me first, and it didn't bother me. Mom was in the kitchen topless, and Dad was watching TV, nude in the living room. His brother was in his own room, nude watching TV. We became good friends, and I was comfortable hanging nude with the family. Sometimes they took us all to the nude beach. I told my parents about it all, and they checked to make sure nothing else weird was going on, and that I was cool with it. The weird thing was they invited my parents over for drinks, and my parents were so uptight, wondering whether they should join in or not and what to expect. They were totally stressed, and when we showed up, the family was dressed normally, and my parents were the ones acting weird the whole time. Story 27. Oh man, I was dating a girl who still lived with her family. One day I'm sitting on their couch with her dad, who I just met, and my then girlfriend comes walking through the living room completely topless. It was already awkward for me, but then her dad says, your breasts look bigger. You pregnant? She turns to her dad, kind of weighs one in each hand and says,
No, I think they're about the same. Thanks, though.
Another time I walked into her room expecting to find her, as I was there to pick her up for something. Instead, I find her teenage, 16-ish brother watching adult films and going to town on himself. He pauses, gives me a friendly nod, and returns to his business. He would also watch adult films at the dinner table, but they had enough decency to agree to a no jerking it at the table rule. The weirdest incident, though, was when her and her youngest, 12-ish brother shared the shower, as in, he gets in right before she gets out so they don't waste any hot water. She then does her hair and makeup and all that, completely naked in the bathroom with him. I saw this because, for whatever reason, this family did not believe in closing the bathroom door ever. Her parents were also swingers. Took me a few dinner parties to realize they were screwing the other guests. Her mom made a point of acknowledging it all as very strange one time. Her reasoning?
We want our kids to grow up comfortable with their sexuality.
Being comfortable with your sexuality does not mean beating it in front of someone you hardly know. This was all in the span of about 2 weeks, for the record. I stopped going over there when I realized this was their normal. We didn't stay together very long after that. It's a pretty old-fashioned bit to joke about in-laws or whatever, but OP, if you ended up getting married to her, I think you'd have some fair points. Story 28. Some girls that were in my Girl Scout troop invited me over to their house to play. We were probably 8 to 10 years old. There were 2 of 10 kids in the house. I was being raised by a single dad, so he was thankful for a little help and I got to play with my friends. First, they told me all about the routines in their house with chores, boy chores, girl chores, chores for the older kids, chores for the younger kids, how they did homework. They were homeschooled. The weird part was when they asked if I wanted a snack. Sure, I'm a fat kid. I love snacks. Their snack was literally an open package of raw ground beef that they each took a handful of to eat. I politely declined and said I wasn't hungry. My dad never let me go back there after I told him that. Another homeschool family from Girl Scouts, only 3 kids, invited me over. We had so much fun playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. Then for dinner they served spaghetti and drank milk with it. I remember being grossed out by that combination. I told my dad I never wanted to eat dinner with them again. He told me I wasn't allowed to play with them anymore anyway, because they lived on a farm and the mom refused vaccinations. This was rural Michigan, early 90s. Story 29. I stayed at a mate's place for the night when we were 16. The family was a little odd with their mannerisms and closeness to begin with, but one event stands out more than others. My buddy and I had eaten a fair amount of pizza, we were stoned, and he ended up uncomfortably bloated from the combo of excess pizza and soft drink. I was okay, but he was getting some seriously bad stomach aches. Cue to him becoming butt-locked on the porcelain throne. The only reason I bore witness to the following event was because we smoked up in his laundry, which is connected to and the only room to reach the bathroom/toilet from the rest of his home. Buddy starts calling out for his mom. Mom comes in and asks what's wrong. Buddy says he's bloated with a sore tummy on the toilet and asks Mom for help. Mom opens the toilet door and starts rubbing his belly while he is farting and crapping up a storm, whispering calming sentiments to him while he blasts butt trumpet into Poseidon's fishbowl. His mom makes slight comments on how brave he is for pooping it all out while he sits there groaning and thanking his mummy. This goes on for a solid 10 minutes. While I'm sitting in the separate shower room nearby, staring into my bowl of weed about 6 levels too far into what the hell land. Buddy finishes his crap, his mother leaves the room, and he walks in to pack a bowl like nothing happened. So I reacted like any normal person would, like nothing freaking happened. Cause addressing that crap was way too weird for my liking. I have plenty of stories with this guy, but for the weirdest normalized family interaction, this takes the cake. Okay, on one hand, I kind of get it if this has been done like his whole life. The dude wouldn't know this is weird. The mother, however, I figure should have enough life experience to realize that doing this, especially in front of a guest, is weird, right? Story 30. I was meeting my boyfriend's parents for the very first time. He had told me they didn't get along, but everything seemed okay enough until the morning of the second day. We were all getting ready to go out somewhere outdoorsy in the winter, and his dad was already ready and waiting, fully dressed in the foyer. I remember the pom-pom on top of his toque. I was on the steps with my boyfriend and his mom, and she was speaking to me warmly about something or other. Then the dad said something about leaving soon, a very mild comment. I didn't even really hear it. Suddenly, the mom who had been speaking to me in a normal tone of voice turns to her husband and shrieks at him at the top of her lungs. I don't even remember what she said, but he had made her suddenly murderously angry, just by mentioning we should probably leave soon. Dude's pom-pom shakes a little, but he says nothing in response to her. Zero. She turns back to me and rolls her eyes, trying to get me to side with her over what a absolute jerk her husband clearly is. I just smiled nervously. Here's the thing. Everyone went back to normal, as if mom hadn't just suddenly gone off like a grenade. That man's life must have been pure hell. I hate to say it, OP, but what you've witnessed is an abusive relationship. I hope they've gone to therapy at the very least, if not the man having gotten out of there entirely. Yikes. Story 31. Maybe more like what they didn't do. I had a newer friend in grade 4 and we had hung out a few times at this point, but now it was the summer break, so we got the whole day to do fun girl crap. It comes to dinner time and we'd already talked about having a sleepover, so I assumed I was staying there for the rest of the evening to, sleep over. Anyway, it comes to dinner time and her mom asked me to call my mom to pick me up. I was somewhat confused and asked my friend. She said I would go home for dinner and then come back for the sleepover. Obviously, I can't judge. Maybe they weren't very financially stable, but it felt off to just go home for an hour or two to eat dinner and then come back. Maybe my family was more inviting. Every time I had friends over for a sleepover, my parents would feed them dinner and breakfast and whatnot. Definitely an uncomfortable feeling, and no, I didn't go back after dinner. Story 32. I'll tell a funny story about living in northern Minnesota. Keep in mind, my family are the weird ones here. My brother's friend had fancy parents. Fancy like city folk fancy. Wool suits, fancy dresses, and the like. That's fancy for where I lived. His friend's parents were Amway people. They dressed up in their Sunday best to come over and try to sell my folks Amway. It was the middle of winter with at least 3 feet of snow on the ground. They came over and tried to pretend our freezing cold house was normal, and tried to sell Amway, which would never work, of course. We couldn't afford an indoor toilet, much less Amway stuff. Eventually, the mother asked, "Where is your bathroom?" So I said, go out the front door, walk straight ahead until you see a path on your left. Once you see the path, follow it and go on the right of the sauna, then keep right and you'll see the outhouse. Stay on the path. Whatever you do, stay on the path. She came back about 15 minutes later, covered in snow, looking like she'd been keel-hauled. All her fancy rich clothes were covered in snow. Her hair was disheveled. She had not stayed on the path. Our house was not that weird for the area we lived in. Story 33. For me, it was the reverse. What my friend saw at my house. My friend, let's call him D, often hung out with me after school. One day when we were 9, he wanted to spend the night. Our parents both said, cool. My mom called for dinner and D nearly jumped up and hit the ceiling. He must be really hungry, I thought. So we go to the kitchen and my mom hands him a plate with some pizza on it. He turns to go sit down and stumbles. The plate falls and breaks. I saw him turn white as a ghost and back away from my dad, who was sitting at the table. Then he bursts out into tears and starts apologizing right away, begging us to forgive him. My mom, a little surprised, says,
"Oh, don't worry. We'll get you some more."
She kept looking at my dad, and once Dee sat down, Mom asked my sister to go eat in the living room. My parents realized it right away, but I was only 9 and didn't understand what was going on. After we finished eating, my mom started asking him questions. Turns out his dad was beating him whenever his mom wasn't around. His dad was apparently very good at hiding it, but it's also why he spent more time at my house than I did at his. Story 35. I came from a well-off family. My friend's family was working class. We were around 4th or 5th grade. He had me over one time to his house. He had an older sister who took us out to get food, but she bought food only for herself. She said,
OP can have some of this pizza, but he's a guest.
And my friend nodded in understanding. But I got the feeling that in his family, they didn't get allowances, and the older sister had to work a job, which might explain why she was unwilling to share food with her little brother. Don't get me wrong, I don't remember much of his parents, but he did get fed. Wasn't like he was underweight. But it was the first time I hung around someone older who was unwilling to share food with someone younger than them. Also, my friend's younger brother routinely peed in their small backyard. Story 36. I had a friend with a big family. I believe they ended up with 6 kids, all with the names that started with S. Everyone was super nice, but the father was, still is, I hope, Mr. Fun-Lovin' Barbecue Dad, to an extreme degree. He was a 2-beer helmet sort of guy, not in a reckless alcoholic way, more in an 80s muscle pants / about to cannonball into the pool at any moment kind of way. Dude had a different giant display with custom-made masked figures stuffed with hay annually for Halloween, like 20 dudes creeping around his lawn, house, roof, and he'd work on them in between downs as the quarterback in the neighborhood street football game. I think you get the picture. One day my friend and I are standing around his driveway just figuring out what we wanted to do. The guy comes up and hands me, maybe 12 years old at the time, one of those giant novelty plastic cups from Yankee Stadium, brimmed with Coke and ice. I neither asked for nor wanted it, but I said thank you and took a sip. I put it down, probably visibly unsure of what to do with it. Friend's dad corrected me and handed the cup to his son / my friend, who took a sip and passed it back to the father, who took a sip and passed it back to me. We stood there drinking this giant unsolicited Coke for 10 minutes, one sip at a time. It wasn't harmful in any kind of way, but I've been thinking about how weird that seemed to me for 20 plus years. I never knew if I was the weirdo for having a family that barely even spoke, if they were the weirdos for expecting me to know they planned to pass a drink back and forth, or for all a bunch of weirdos. And maybe I should just think about something else. Maybe I'm biased because I just got done being sick, but that doesn't seem sanitary or good. But like, alright, I guess. For my money, OP, I would say they're the weird ones. As you said, not in any harmful way, but strange. Story 37. Mine is actually something that was, in fact, normal. I was in foster care for a year and a half between 12 and 13 years old. I managed to make one good friend. I started school at the beginning of the year, but I was pretty weird, and I liked to wear my old ratty clothes, even though my foster mom insisted on dressing me up all pretty and girly. So I had some trouble with friends. Me and Dee were pretty tight early on, and she lived in my small subdivision, so I spent a lot of time there. The first time I went over, both her parents were home with her older brother, and they were so nice. They were also fully clothed, like her dad had a shirt on and wasn't walking around in boxers, and they were so kind to one another. Like there were friendly jokes and stuff, but they weren't mean. They didn't shout at each other or slam doors or yell across the house to each other. They had game nights and movie nights, and sometimes we would just hang out and read in the living room with her parents. It was so different from what I was used to experiencing in my old friends' houses, and it was really nice. Story 38. My friend had a door in his house that was blocked by clutter. It was the room his stepmom ended herself in. I guess they just abandoned the room afterwards. I never mentioned it, and neither did he. It was really eerie, especially when there's a conspiracy in his family that his stepmom was actually murdered by her abusive ex-husband. The whole situation really screwed with me every time I visited. Also, his dad casually making jokes about how he almost knocked up an 18-year-old chick when he was 12. Come to think of it, his entire family was really off, including him. It's probably for the best that we don't talk anymore. Dude was kind of a scumbag in hindsight. He cheated on his ex multiple times, but threw a fit when she got reamed by one of our buddies. Then he started hanging out with pill poppers and ravers who would bang each other while we visited. Then joined the army and got engaged to my ex. Chris, if you're reading this, yeah, I'm talking about you. Story 39. This was in my teens. Went over to a buddy's place. We'd known each other for a while, and he never showed any sign of deviancy. We got up to his room. He pulled out his laptop, loads up adult films, and plays a clip of a dog going to town on a woman. Another time, late teens. I went to visit a girlfriend at her parents'. I lived far away, so I get invited to stay on the couch for the night. I was into this girl, so I'm hoping she'll slip out of her room to visit me in the night. I fall asleep and wake up to the sound of heels on hardwood coming from their kitchen. I'm thinking she put on heels and was looking to get frisky before I had to leave. I walk into the kitchen. It's pitch black, but my eyes start adjusting. I see a figure, but the calves above those heels are massive. Too tall and wide-shouldered. It's the dad in a dress. The dad in a dress and heels at 3 a.m. walking around the kitchen. He doesn't see me. I go back to the couch and pretend to sleep. Look, man, whatever you want to do, but maybe take a night off when you have guests sleeping on the couch. I'm saying this for your sake. Story 40. My dad was friends with who I can only describe as some kind of mad scientist. His entire house was full of huge industrial equipment. He used lawn chairs and stools for furniture. His house smelled of oil and burnt metal, and he drank some kind of silver drink that was turning his skin blue. He had refrigerators full of rock samples and beakers of fluid, some kind of, an incubation chamber with gloves built into the side so you wouldn't have to touch the samples inside, centrifuges, and just tons of stuff I don't have the names for. He said he had invented anti-gravity back in the 70s and the government had classified it and then ruined him to keep him quiet. He said he was nominated for a Nobel at one point, before they took everything from him. I think he was a materials scientist. He had a giant floating disc behind his house and he was trying to weaponize it. It was like a giant hockey puck, about 12 foot around with a filthy rubberized exterior. When it wasn't hovering and on the landing pad, it weighed a ton. But when he flipped the switch on the control arm, it would just float up. I saw him move it around the backyard and raise it about 20 feet off the ground. No sound, no motor. I've always figured it was maglev, but I've never seen maglev lift anything 2 stories off the ground, so I don't know. He was trying to build a fleet to fly into the Pentagon, but couldn't figure out the guidance system. Something about line of sight and sustaining the field. I never understood what he was on about. He died about 10 years back, so I guess it never came to anything. Still, that was weird as hell. I wonder what happened to the disc. Story 41. Not really a friend, but a fellow student. She always had a bit of a messy look. So I come back to her and her ex's maisonette. They lived together even though they were separated for more than a year. There was cat crap everywhere. They had one cat and a litter box, but they let her crap everywhere and did not clean up. We were walking to her room upstairs, and as she talked about everyday stuff, I'm noticing there's even cat crap on corners on the stairs. One step in particular had it all spread out onto the middle, and she just steps over it while I follow her. In her room, I immediately noticed there's cat crap in her bed. I asked why she doesn't clean it up, and she literally says she, quote, has no time for that crap. Being from a hygienic household myself, I could only think, get out, get out, get out. So I looked at my phone, said something came up, and she walked me downstairs. We walk by a big pile of laundry, and sure enough, there's cat crap on there too. Going down the stairs, she skips that one step again expertly, and first goes to grab a soda. And as I walk with her into the kitchen, there's even cat crap on the counter. The next day in college, I told her I was worried about what I saw. I asked her if she has no time to clean, when the last time was that she cleaned her bed. She said her mom comes in once every 2 months to wash everything and do the laundry. I tell her to live with 2-month-old cat crap in your kitchen and bed is not normal and really unhealthy. She just says, who cares? I kept this to myself, but it got talked about by other students behind her back as she had moreover. This was years ago and I kinda avoided her since, because I didn't know how to deal with her attitude on this and other things. But Diane, if you're reading this, I still believe you have or had Diogenes syndrome. Story 42. 9th grade. Friends with a big group of people mixed genders. My mom gets a call from a mom of one of the guys in the group. My mom calls up to me like, it's Blank's mom calling to schedule a playdate. Do you want to go over to Blank's house on Saturday? I said, sure. That kid is nice. Seems weird that his mom is calling, but maybe he's shy. We don't know each other as well as other kids in the group. I bike over there on Saturday. Blank's mom greets me at the door. Acts surprised I got there on my own. I go upstairs to Blank's room and ask what he wants to do. He's like, do you want to play with these? And proceeds to open up a toy chest full of well-loved plushies and action figures. A little odd, but still, I'm not gonna knock a little nostalgic make-believe time. So I say, sure, how do we play with them? And he was like, we make them fight. So I sat on this 14 or 15-year-old's bed, holding out toys so he could bonk other toys against them and make pow noises for 3 hours. I suggested we do something else about every 10 minutes, but he kept saying, just wait till after we make these guys fight. I did not go over there again. I told my parents it felt like one of my babysitting gigs. He was fine at school though, so we just kept to that. Story 43. We are kids. I'm invited to a friend's place. His mom sends us to the lake so she and husband can bang. We are young, but old enough to know what's happening, maybe 10-ish. We come back, and everything's normal. Go to use friend's bathroom. His parents had one in their master suite, but I'm not talking about that one. Dual sink bathroom. Both sinks are full with piles of fake dongs. Full. Not one, but multiple dildi. Gobs of them. On a side note, I think a large group of silicone fake dongs should be called a murder, because with that many involved, it is 100% certain that my friend's mom got her holes slaughtered that day. Anyway, the sinks are plugged, and my friend's mom's toys are soaking in his sinks. There has to be over a dozen. They're floating in the water, like his mom just filmed the final scene for a spin-off adult film called The Idiot for Red Dongtober. I ask him why this is happening. Friend says his mom likes to soak them in hot salt water to clean them. I wanted to ask him why they're in his sink, but before I can ask, I wonder how he knows it's salt water. I ask and he says he can smell them, so I asked why the hell he smelled them. And he tells me something to the effect of, so I know when they're clean, so I can take them out to dry for her. Never spoke about why his mom habitually soaked them in his sink again. It's been over 25 years, but I still think about it sometimes. Story 44. Our neighbor Ben kept venomous snakes in his house when I was a kid. Lots of snakes, in buckets, in cages, all over the place. And other critters like squirrels, too. He would invite us over to show off what he'd caught in the woods. My dad seemed to think it was cool, so I didn't realize how strange it was. One day when my dad was at work and just my mom was home, Ben came over in a panic. He'd been bitten in the arm by a diamondback rattlesnake. We all got in the car and she drove him to the hospital. I will never forget being in the waiting room. It was like a movie. My mom was really upset. The doctor comes out and for some reason, the first thing he says is there's nothing they can do for him. My mom goes hysterical. Before the doc can explain that he'd been bitten so many times in the past, his body had natural antivenoms. They didn't need to do anything for him. He was just fine. No way the doctor walked out and said there's nothing we can do for him. What an absolute drama queen. I bet he was waiting his whole career to say that though. At least in a context that wouldn't make people cry. Story 45. 4th grade. The new weird girl in our class invited me to a sleepover in her fancy neighborhood. Being a decently nice kid and from a lower middle class family, I decided to attend said sleepover. While she was giving me a tour of her house, I couldn't help but notice her bedroom was absolutely massive compared to her parents' room. So I asked her what the deal was with that, and she said that since she was an only child, her parents had given her the master bedroom because they wanted her to have a lot of space for a lot of toys. Okay, cool, that checks out. She was an only child and her room was filled with insane amounts of goodies. So we play with some Barbies for a while and then go downstairs while her mom is finishing up dinner. I was telling her mom how nice her house was and how cool it was they let her daughter have such a big room. I mean, what a dream. She proceeds to nonchalantly tell me their daughter had actually thrown a huge tantrum and demanded to switch bedrooms. And how could they say no after she put up such a big fuss over something she had decided she wanted? Okay, red flag number 1. Noted. Then we sit down for dinner. Well, her parents and I did. My, quote, new friend ate from a dog bowl on the floor. Confused, I start asking a bunch of questions. Apparently, she would only eat a Dinty Moore beef stew while she was at home, because her parents refused to buy her actual dog food, and also only from a dog bowl on the floor. The entire dinner, her mom was begging her to, quote, please, at least eat some peas at the table with your friend. She would only bark in response, and I guess that meant no, because she never came to the table. After the most awkward dinner I've ever had to this day, she started hardcore bossing me around, and did things like refuse to allow me to touch her computer mouse when it was my turn to make over my Barbie on her Mac, would only let me watch her jump on her trampoline, etc. Then we played with her hamsters, but she demanded that I play with them in a very precise way, and a few times I screwed up, I guess, because she literally screamed at me that I was doing it wrong. So I only had one choice as a lone child in a house of crazies. I faked throwing up in her stolen master ensuite bathroom, claimed I was homesick, and called my mom at 2 a.m. to get me. She got there with the lightning speed and took me to Crystal's drive-thru, while I spilled all the beans on what had happened. Story 46. Took my younger brother, who is a 7th grader, with me to a new friend's house for dinner and to hang out one evening when I was a sophomore in high school. We had moved to this part of town during the summer before my high school freshman year, so I had 0 friends. New friend lived in our neighborhood, and we'd become friends because we were both in JROTC, so I was happy to have a new friend nearby. We arrive and meet him and his parents, and they welcome us to join them for Pizza Hut and Pepsi. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. After dinner, they say, "Hey, how about some TV?" My brother and I are like, "Sure, what else is there to do?" And we join them in the living room. Friend's father shuffles through some DVDs on their entertainment stand and selects one, pops it into the DVD player, and takes a seat alongside his wife. Movie begins playing, and I suddenly realize it's a Faces of Death DVD. We watch a SWAT/hostage situation go wrong and see graphic footage of the armed assailant get his stomach blown open with buckshot from a SWAT guy's shotgun. My friend, his younger brother, and both his parents laugh their butts off. They exchange high fives and are looking around at us to gauge our reactions. My brother and I are horrified. I'm obviously sick to my stomach and immediately call our mother to come pick us up. Weirdest freaking family I've ever met. Story 47. I was at a buddy's house playing Tony Hawk 4. He gets into a tiff with his sister, which ends in her throwing the remote directly into his face hard. He brushes it off. I was like, what the hell, but kept playing. His sister runs to their parents and the dad storms out and starts beating the crap out of my buddy right next to me. My buddy starts using his feet to push him off, but his dad keeps smacking him in the face and saying, "You want to kick? You want to kick?" and hitting him hard as hell. I sat there doing 540 melons and feeling this overwhelming desire to leave. Afterwards, he wiped his tears and asked for his turn to play as Eddie from Iron Maiden because I typed in the cheat codes for all characters while he got his butt kicked. What a trooper. I hope he's doing okay. Well, that's not the best home environment I've ever heard of. I really hope dude is doing alright and, most importantly, gotten the hell out of there. A family like that can hardly be called a family. By blood relation only. Story 48. I was maybe 14 to 15, and a friend invited me to his dad's house after school to play some Halo 2 multiplayer. The dad wasn't home, but his girlfriend and her 11-year-old daughter were. After a while, the daughter came and sat next to the chair I was sitting in, and started asking me weird questions, eventually asking if I had a girl I liked. To which my friend quipped, "Shut up, leave him alone, we're busy." So I just didn't answer. At some point, out of nowhere, she crawls up on top of me and starts giving me a lap dance, saying, "Do you like that, Daddy?" and making noises. I don't know what to say or how to react until a moment later my friend asks, "Hey, is she bothering you?" At this point, her face is very close to mine, like she's going to kiss me, and her mother, looking at us, says, "Baby girl, if you're bothering our guest, you need to get down, okay?" I then mutter something like, "Yeah, I'm trying to play a game." So she climbs down, goes into the other room, and me and my friend keep playing Halo like nothing happened. I haven't spoken to that friend in years, but the one time I asked him about it, he said, "Yeah, she does that. Next time you come over, just push her off if she does it again." I never went back there. I'm still shaking my head over it. I sometimes wonder what became of that 11-year-old girl, and I really hope she found a better way in life. Story 49. Friend's dad used to smoke crack in the bathroom. He'd spend hours in there, which sucked because it was the only bathroom in the apartment. He came flying out of there one time right towards me with so much concern in his eyes. I was sitting on the couch, one arm on the left arm of the couch and my right arm on the top back portion of the couch against the wall. He charged right at me and said, "OP, did I step on your hand?" Dead serious and hella worried that he had. I just looked at the position of both of my hands and said, no. Would have been wild as hell if you had, though. Later that night, he asked us for some mushrooms and acid. We obliged because, well, it was his house and we were selling out of there. He was always drunk off coffee brandy and always cracked out. We added mushrooms and acid to the list. He smoked some weed with us and sat on an ottoman against the window, then just leaned back for some reason and went right through the window back first. Took the curtains down in the process, which I think saved him some nasty cuts, because he never wore a shirt. It was an upstairs apartment, but he landed on the front porch balcony, so not a huge deal. He'd always be on some wild crap, though. Came out of the restroom asking if his hair was on fire or if there were snakes on the back porch. Literally in the middle of town, no snakes for miles. The back porch was upstairs. Like, how the hell do you think snakes could get up there, bro? I got so many stories about this dude I could go on all night. He used to be a freaking baller before going to prison. Owned a nightclub, sold drugs to Rick James. He had a weekly gig where he would sell 3 giant hefty bags of weed every week to the same buyer. He had a limo. Then prison. Crack days. Then moved up to NorCal with son, got off all the drugs and booze, started eating organic and raising chickens, growing a garden. Now he has dreads to his knees and you'd never imagine he used to smoke rock. I mean, in his own way, it sounds like he found happiness and peace in life away from the drugs. So, good for him. That is not an easy thing to do. Does it sound like it swung pretty hard in the other direction? Yeah. But in my humble opinion, I think a little better than smoking crack all the time. Story 50. I had a friend that had a wealthy father. He lived in a big fancy house on a nearby island. I'd never met her dad, but had hung out with her at her mom's house many times. So I get invited to go over to her dad's for a weekend, and I'm so excited as I know he lives on a beach, has fancy electronics, etc. Well, her dad turns out to be a total female-hating, power-tripping bozo. He kept tabs on us and refused to let us even be alone in their backyard chatting or whatever. We were about 12 to 13 at the time. He told me my shoes were dirty and made my friends and I get cleaning supplies out of the closet and clean our shoes. At dinner, all the women and girls had to wash their faces, hands, and put their hair up. We had to wait until her dad started eating to eat, and after eating, the women were expected to pick up and clean everything. No wonder her parents were divorced. I declined to go to her dad's after that. Story 51. Not at a friend's house, but I think this qualifies. It was 30 plus years ago. I was about 7, and a couple days a week I went to a home-based daycare for after-school care. There were a bunch of kids there, including a boy and his sister. They were older. He was probably 9, and I think she was 10 or 11. One day I was playing in the backyard with a couple of kids, and we see a bunch of the other kids gathered around a picnic table that was on the patio. Curious, we go over to see what's happening, and find the 2 siblings banging under the picnic table. Being very young, none of us really knew what we were seeing, and we were all asking questions. The boy was answering like he was conducting a live sex ed class, even moving his and his sister's bodies to give the kids a better view of what he was doing. 3 questions I vividly remember. Question: what are you doing? Answer: it's called screwing. Question: where are you putting it? Is it going in her butt? Answer: you put your thing in her private parts and move it in and out. Then I asked, what does it do? Why are you doing it? The boy said, it feels really good. Do you want to try? And his sister looked at me and said, yeah, you can do it next if you want. I remember at that moment I had this feeling that this was something really bad. Like I said, I was only 7, so I didn't really have any idea what we were seeing. It was just a feeling. But I think I said something like, that's okay. I remember those siblings repeating this a few more times while I was at that daycare. I never told anyone that story. I remember thinking I would somehow get in trouble, or I would get the brother and sister in trouble. But I really wished I wasn't so scared to tell. As an adult, you quickly realized there must be some horribly screwed up crap going on at the siblings' house, and they needed help. Story 52. Not so much a friend as just someone I went to school with and was nice to. The school had forgot to inform me they would be closing early that day. I was in a new city and had no idea how to get home and had no money. Plus, my dad had switched his phone number, so I was pretty much stranded. A fat lad I was mates with and this girl we both sort of fancied decided they didn't want to leave me stranded for hours, so we hung out for 3 hours around town and stuff. We eventually go back to her house, which is in the chaviest place I've ever seen. We meet the parents and they reveal they've got one entire wall of their house where they keep tons of animals. I'm talking snakes, tarantulas, hedgehogs, lizards, hamsters, all in these little see-through plastic boxes. The dad took the snake out and poked it in my face. Me, being terrified of snakes at the time, backed up against the wall and must have refused to stroke it about 20 times. Went upstairs, more animals in cages. Went to her room, felt a bit like she was trying to set up a trio. It got uncomfortable. We ended up just going to a shopping center and the fat lad kindly paid for my food. Was a really nice guy. And after the girl left, we were just like, what the hell was all that at her house? Story 53. There was a girl who openly liked me in high school, but I wasn't attracted to. However, we had lots of classes together and it was basically impossible to avoid her. She was nice enough, but extremely quirky. One time she invited me over to her house to hang out and I said sure because I was young, dumb, and fully incapable of deliberately hurting someone's feelings. So I go over to her house and everything seems normal. We're just talking in the living room when her younger sister, whom I've never seen or met before and I'm guessing was like 10 years old, walks up to us with a strange, wide-eyed, unblinking doll look on her face. She just stands there. Then, without warning, she just lets out one of the loudest farts I had ever heard. I just couldn't believe it. Normally, I would have laughed, but the girl who had invited me over didn't react at all. She was literally in mid-sentence when this happened, didn't skip a beat or even acknowledge her sister's presence, let alone acknowledging the fact that Hiroshima just got wiped off the face of the earth right in front of us. She just kept talking and the younger sister just walked off. I simply couldn't process this and was extremely weirded out. Not so much because of the fart, but because no one even acknowledged it, let alone how unbelievably epic it was. Hilarity turned to horror and I noped the hell out of there as quickly and politely as I could. OP, did you ever ask the person if they had a sister? Maybe you just saw a ghost, and maybe that ghost let one rip. Who knows? Story 54. I'm a cable guy and I've seen so much strange stuff. I did an install for a state trooper that had a glass cookie jar filled with marijuana buds on his coffee table like they were mints. He also snuggled with his girlfriend on the couch under a blanket in their PJs, which was basically their underwear. In the same room, I had to do 90% of my work. Hell, today I had a job where dude's girlfriend came down from their bedroom, and she just laid down on her belly in the middle of the living room in boy shorts, cheeks hanging out for all the world to see. He didn't seem to see anything wrong with it. They also spent a good portion of their time snuggling under the covers in their bedroom while I had to do work in there. Woman decides to shower in the master bedroom while I also had to do work in the master bedroom. Stuff like that. Story 55. When I was in high school, I slept at a friend's place one night. Back then, I was a big midnight snacker, so I got up in the middle of the night to go scrounge a bite to eat. I turned on the kitchen light and there were roaches everywhere. Just thousands of them crawling all over the dishes from the previous evening's dinner. I was so freaking grossed out, I just turned it off and went back to bed. But I didn't sleep for the rest of the night because I was scared of them crawling on me. In the morning, I mentioned it in a sort of half-casual kind of way, and he was just like, "Yeah, we don't go into the kitchen at night," like it was perfectly normal. Needless to say, never went back. As much as my mom complained that our house was a disaster, this person's house was a garbage dump. I gained an immediate and visceral understanding of why my mom made such a big deal about cleaning the house, and I've been something of a neat freak ever since. I absolutely refused to live with bugs of any kind in the house. If I see one or even evidence of them, I go full-on bug apocalypse. Foggers in every room, etc. Just the thought of that crap grosses me out even today. Story 56. I was at a barbecue maybe 15 years ago, and the family was all putting peanut butter on their hot dogs and burgers. I thought this was super weird and had refused to try it myself when they saw my confused look on my face. 9 years ago, I started working where I'm working, and one of the guys I work with was putting peanut butter on his burgers he brought in for lunch. About 3 years ago or so, I was visiting my mom and her fiancé. We went to a burger restaurant for dinner one night. Her fiancé offered to pay for my meal under the condition I tried this particular burger. If I recall, it had ketchup, mustard, pickles, onion rings, tomato, lettuce, bacon, cheddar cheese, and, you guessed it, peanut butter. He told me if I absolutely didn't like it, he would order me another, no problem. After some hesitation and pressure from my mom, I reluctantly agreed. I'm not over-exaggerating in any way, shape, or form when I say it was the best burger I had ever eaten. Since then, occasionally, I will put peanut butter on my burgers. It actually tastes so good. I can't believe it. I have to try this. It's a combination that in my mind is weird, but I feel like it could work. Like I see the vision, you know? I want this to be good so badly. If any of you have tried this, let me know. Story 57. TLDR. Super creepy bedtime routine and being treated like a doll. When I was about 12 years old, my parents went out of town to look for a new house to move into, so my siblings, older brother, younger brother, and I stayed with friends of theirs. The son also happened to be my older brother's BFF, so it wasn't like they were strangers or anything. The mom was genuinely obsessed with me. She wanted a daughter so bad, and I was the ballet, pink, pretty, everything girly girl. She had 3 boisterous boys. I spent most of that entire week just listening to her talk about how wonderful it was to have a girl in the house. She doted on me, we had girl dates, we got our hair done and nails done. It was way too much for socially anxious and awkward me. Now, as I've been TTC for years, I can understand just getting carried away in the joy of loving a child, but it made me feel very awkward. The part that still creeps me out, though, the dad was in charge of bedtime. Younger sister, who is now my younger brother, and I were sharing a room as we're both girls at the time. He sent all of us to bed at 7 p.m. He wanted us sleeping by 7:30 p.m. It was still daylight, and here it comes. He insisted on reading the girls bedtime stories. Long bedtime stories. So here I was, summer before freshman year, laying in bed while this man reads me a fairy tale. He tells me to close my eyes so I can fall asleep while he's reading. As if that could happen. Remember, I'm captain of the varsity anxiety squad. So I'm laying awkwardly on my back, and he started asking me a bunch of questions about, is that how you sleep, on your back? And he demanded that I roll over and lay like I do when I'm sleeping. There was no physical touching, but I am still so completely creeped out about it. Like there's something going on in a dude's head to read a 12-year-old girl bedtime stories and discuss the way she's laying in her bed, right? Yeah, I think I'm with you, OP. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessarily with harmful or creepy intentions, but it is strange, without a doubt. Story 58. I think my house may have been this place. I grew up lower middle class in small town rural Midwest. My parents were not the cleanest, and boy did my mother love to collect. Very borderline hoarders for many years. I've always had several animals, and I'm sure you know where this is headed. On top of that, my parents, mother especially, were the chain smokers of all chain smokers. As an adult who has left the home, I never realized how intense of a culmination all of that actually was. I smelled like rotten cigarettes and dog for much of my life, and yet I managed to become one of the popular kids. Not so much the cliche jerk kid, but more of the accidental, hey, this kid might smell funny, but she's hilarious type popular. My house was the house to be at in high school. I had friends over every single day. How they enjoyed visiting me, I do not know. Our dining room was literal pee and crap heaven. I don't think they ever saw my mom without a cigarette, and we all knew the proper trail to navigate that cluttered home drunk as hell at 2 a.m. in the dark. Just saying, here's a thanks to kids that love others even when things are different. Story 59. Violence. I went to my mate's house a few times, as you do when you're young. The first time I remember sitting downstairs playing NES with him when his parents suddenly began fist-fighting each other, so we left to play Lego upstairs. There was another occasion when I went to stay for the weekend. After breakfast, his older brother started arguing with his dad. Brother went to the kitchen and came back brandishing a large knife, so his mom sent us upstairs to his room and locked us in. It was really screwed up listening to his brother and parents shouting and fighting. My friend said that it happens a lot, and he's sometimes locked in his room all day. It went quiet after about an hour, and then his mom came back upstairs and unlocked the door. She had obviously been punched in the face and had to clean up a bloody nose. She told me I had to go home, so I promptly did. Walking down the stairs, it was eerily calm. Mate's dad was sitting in his chair smoking, and his bro was just chilling watching TV. I never went back there again. Story 60. I was really poor growing up, and I lived in a very bad area. My mom was on drugs, and most of my friends had parents with similar issues. One day, my friend said he wants to go home and make some toast and asks if I want to come with him. My mom really didn't feed us, sold our food stamps for drugs. Most of our meals were from school lunches, so of course I'm like, hell yeah, hot bread, let's go. We get to my friend's house and he gets the bread and we sit down at the kitchen table. He starts the toaster with no bread in it, and I'm like, dude, you forgot the bread. He's like, nah, you just gotta wait a minute. And after a few seconds, a family of roaches that must have been living off the crumbs in the toaster comes scurrying out of the toaster as horrifyingly as you can possibly imagine. Then my man proceeds to pop in the toast like nothing happened. That was the first time I ever saw a roach, and the first time I realized other people had it even worse than I did. Story 61. When I was really young, I went to a friend's house to have a sleepover. I think it was the first time my mom ever let me. They were a really, really poor family. He lived in conditions beyond belief. The house was never opened, smelled so bad. I've never seen anything like it. He had an abusive father. The first and only time I was there, I witnessed the father kicking him with so much strength. It was shocking to me. He said sometimes you have to hit them, you understand, so they learn. It's the only way. I know that was already bad, but the weirdest thing was that my friend had a pee bucket in his bedroom so he could pee at night, and eventually I peed there too. Since it was a bucket, it splashed all over. No wonder it was the smelliest house I've ever went to. Poor guy. Eventually, his mom had the strength to separate from his father and they moved to a nicer place, and he actually seems pretty okay now. Story 62. Go to my friend's house and the first thing was the mom and dad made steaks, and the dad basically ate it raw. I'm talking 2-inch T-bone, barely cooked with onions and mushrooms that had been sauteed in Dales. Mom was drinking wine and dad was drinking Busch Light. So we finished eating and the dad left to go to work. The mom was a little sloshed and passed out on the sofa. So my friend was like, I'm going into my mom's room for a minute. When I call, you come in here. So they called and I came over, opened the door, and she was standing at the end of the bed pointing an old Western revolver, wearing a full-on Klan hood and robe. She said, "Are you scared?" I was like, no, but yeah, I was. Tried to play it cool and was like, let me try on the hood because I was too big to wear the robe. We go watch TV after and then head off to bed. I was given my own room. At some time in the night, the mother awoke me speaking and it was incoherent. She pulls down her pants, squats in the middle of the room and starts peeing. I walk by her and go wake up the daughter. I would like to say this was the last time I stayed the night, but I lived in an abusive home, and even though I was underage, my mother kicked me out. They took me in, no questions, and were extremely nice. Daughter ended up beating me with an iron and sprayed me with Raid because she thought I took her last cigarette. I went to live in a group home. The girl called about a week later and apologized for it, as it had rolled off her desk and was on the floor by the wall. Left a voicemail as I never spoke to them again. Until 2 weeks ago when I suddenly got a message from her on my 40th birthday. We were 16. I've never spoken a word of this to anyone. Feels weird just thinking of it. A clan hood, huh? Okay. Definitely an interesting environment for her to be raised in. Unfortunate she turned out to be a bit of a jerk. I also love that excuse while apologizing, like, oh, it actually fell over by the wall, as if that changes anything. Even if OP did take your last cigarette, that's dramatic. Story 63. Had a friend who lived down the road from me. She moved there when we were really young, and we used to play in her front garden a lot as young children. When I became a teenager, I started being invited indoors. Upon reflection, I think it's weird a young child was never invited indoors until I was like 14 or 15, but now I know why. She shared a bedroom with her sister, who is the same age as my sister. My sister was friends with her sister. Seemed nice because, like, sometimes we would all hang out together. Her mom was a massive hippie, and I loved that house. It was decorated with gorgeous pictures of the two girls up the staircase, and yellow walls and rugs and decorations everywhere. It was really pretty, but also clean. Anyway, I remember one time we'd come home from school and went to her house to hang out in her bedroom, listening to music or whatever, and then I'd go home. The friend would try to solicit me into doing intimate acts with her at this time, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. Can we just listen to music and dress up or something? Another time, we were watching TV in her living room and her mom walks into the kitchen. I hear her turn on the hob and turn it off again. Her eldest daughter walks in. At this time, she's like 18/19 and starts shouting at her and then asks me to go home, so I do. Another time, the daughter who I'm friends with has a house party, and we're like 16 or 17 at this time. I'm walking into the kitchen and see the two arguing with the mom. The eldest daughter is crying, saying, "Mom, please, please stop. I just want you to stop." And turns out her mom was shooting H this whole time, and this is the first time I'd seen someone take it. And it was dark. Like, the youngest daughter was so numb to it all, and would just be like, I don't see why it's a big deal. And the eldest was, rightly so, upset about the whole ordeal. After I saw this, I spoke to my sister about it, and apparently the youngest was being SA'd by her mom's boyfriend. The eldest knew about this because she caught him doing it one time, and the mom had been abusing drugs for years. My sister tried to talk to the eldest about it and get her help, but, you know, these things are always complicated. I always think about this family, and how I used to go play Sims with the youngest in the summer, and we used to go wild swimming all the time. Like, we were close, and now the two sisters don't speak much. The eldest is the caretaker for the youngest only son because she started abusing drugs herself. Really sad. I wish things worked out differently for them. My sister and the eldest are friends again, though, and the eldest pretty much moved out after the party and started a family of her own. I am so glad she's okay. Story 64. Had a good friend who was an only child. Entire family smoked something and kept it hidden from the rest of the family. Mom smoked cigs and hid it. Son, my friend, smoked weed and hid it. Dad smoked cigars and hid it. The weird thing was, everyone knew about the other people's smoking, but thought the others didn't know about theirs. I had individual conversations with each of them about how they kept it a secret and would wink at me when I was sleeping over or whatever and caught them. Not including the son because I knew he smoked weed. We would get stoned together after all. But would talk about the other two and how they knew. Stuff like, I know Billy smokes pot and his dad sneaks cigars, but they would murder me if they found out I smoke cigarettes. Or, I know my mom smokes cigs and my dad hits the Cubans, but they would murder me if they knew I smoked weed. And, Billy smokes pot occasionally and his mom goes to the garden, aka sneaks a cig, but they would be mad if they knew I smoked Cubans every day. Let's keep it our little secret. Super freaking weird because I just went over because they let us watch adult films and eat junk food. And I felt like I was the keeper of this big secret that was like a game of Smoky Clue. Story 65. Literally just queso for dinner. My parents are pretty generic upper middle class white folk. Dad was career military officer, retired as a colonel. That meant almost all of our meals were at the dining dining room table. The only exception was the night Star Trek was on. He was in the sciences in the military, kind of a nerd, but an officer nonetheless. They lived, quote-unquote, normal and ate healthy. He retired from the military when I was 13, and his military-provided medical science training and education gave him a six-figure job right out of the gate. My best friend's parents were poor hippies, like went to Woodstock and never left kind of hippies. Our first several experiences with pot were the crap we snagged from his parents and smoked. Eventually, we started smoking along with them. One night, me, my friend, our girlfriends, and his parents were just passing around a joint. His mom goes to make supper. She comes back with a Tupperware of the best munchie food. It was just Velveeta and ground beef. But I was high, and unlike my mom, his mom didn't drain the fat when she cooked it. That was supper. A far cry from the three-course TV family suppers I normally had. It rocked my world, but the idea of what is having basically a snack food as a dinner was a foreign concept to me. The part that has always interested me was that while I thought his folks were cool and fun and great smoking buddies, he used the term won the parent lottery to describe my living situation. He would have traded his hippie parents that I loved for growing up with the most Norman Rockwell family you've ever met. I see what he was saying. My parents set themselves up nicely. Then they were always about to help me and my sister, while my best friend ended up having to help his parents pay their bills. My parents are awesome, loving, wealthy, forgiving, etc. But I wouldn't complain if I had his folks either. It really is true what they say. The grass is always greener on the other side. You always pine for what you don't have, even when what you have is the envy of many, even when you know how lucky you are. Story 66. A boy I was dating back in high school was your average, nerdy, socially awkward teenager. We had been seeing each other for a couple of months when his older sister came to town, and he invited me to hang out with him at his place so I could meet her. The first thing that struck me was how identical they looked. Like, I honestly would have believed his sister was just him in a wig if I didn't have them both in front of me. I go through the pleasantries and we start watching a movie with my boyfriend sitting in between the sister and I. I start to notice over the course of the movie that any time they touch, their hands linger for just a beat too long, and whenever one makes a comment about the movie, the other playfully makes fun or makes a lewd joke. Now, if that's not weird enough, I'm sitting there on the couch feeling like a third wheel when the sister slips her shoes off and places them in my boyfriend's lap. She moves her feet around on his crotch before whining that he owes her a foot rub, quote, for earlier, and they share an amused look. He obliges, and after he's done, she snuggles up to him, leaning her head on his shoulder. The whole experience grossed me out. I shortly after asked why he and his sister were so touchy. He got real defensive and tried to justify it as a normal sibling behavior. Story 67. My mom made me hang out with one of the kids who lived in my neighborhood and also happened to be part of my homeschool group. I wasn't fond of him because, like most homeschoolers, he and his family were weird. One day, he and his mom came to my house for a visit. I suppose we were around 10 at the time. We were in the middle of playing Korean War. He was obsessed with the military and that was his favorite war, while our moms visited in the kitchen when he decided he needed to go to the bathroom. Within 2 minutes or so, I hear him wailing like I've never heard before from inside the bathroom. Everyone rushes to the bathroom to see what's the matter. His mom opens the door to check on him and immediately exclaims, "Oh my God, Zachary!" before quickly going in and shutting the door again. But not before I saw what happened. What I saw still baffles me to this day. From the floor to the ceiling, puddles, smears, globs, full-size logs, and every possible consistency in between, crap happened. I've never seen surfaces painted so completely brown than I did that day. How, why, or what caused this perversion, I don't know, but the fact that it came out of a sobbing 8 to 10-year-old boy just never seemed right to me. The most unbelievable part was what caught my eye the moment before the door was shut. Clots of coagulated brown goop clung to the ceiling in 3 or 4 separate splats like they'd been tossed up there on purpose. The sight of the scene left my mind reeling and my mouth agape. I almost laughed because, I was a kid, but I was just too disturbed to do so. None of it made sense to me. I was now faced with the reality that a kid that I'd spent a childhood playing with either had an evil butt with a mind of its own, or had a crap thing and played with his poop until he cried. To this day, I'm still amazed by the event. My mom keeps in touch with the family, and the kid eventually went on to have a successful career in the military, and is now married to a beautiful girl and doing really well for himself. Hell, he's even doing better than me. I'm happy for him, but I will never forget this bizarre memory he left me with. Well, OP, thanks for that. Hope no one was eating. Good God. ugh. Like, there were some gross ones before, but oh, OP went in too much detail for my liking. Story 68. I was dating a girl in my teens I met on Facebook by us both commenting on a mutual friend's post. She was a bit overweight and was from a city that was basically the trailer trash town, but seemed nice and smart, so I gave it a chance. First few times, she came over to my place, and the last time I saw her was when I dropped her off at her home. It was one of those double-wide trailer homes, but on a property lot which was basically the entire neighborhood, like a trailer home community with home-sized dirt lots for each place. We went inside as she wanted to give me some of her favorite books, as we had bonded over reading. Her home was like a cross between something on Hoarders and a scene in a TV show where there's a swarm of insects from a discovered dead body. Not lying. Within 10 seconds of being inside, I was swatting away flies as fast as I could. Easily 5 dozen. Likely closer to 100 plus in that tiny trailer. Explained a lot of her, quote, quirks I just ignored, like never throwing away trash, leaving uneaten food in my room for hours without asking if it should go in the trash or the sink, so I always ended up cleaning up after she left. Literally swatting off multiple flies while I stood there and heard the hum of them like some sick orchestra, destroyed all interest for her on the spot. Dropped off the books at her local library with a note that it was for X, left a text and said I wasn't interested. I almost threw up after leaving, and somehow still had a flyer to sneak its way into my car that wouldn't leave even with the windows down and the AC blasting on full. Not ever going to be classist, but if someone is okay living in filth, in my experience, they'll have no problem bringing it into your own place. Story 69. My house when I was about 10 or so. We had neighbors that showed up at dinner time just about every day. My parents would always invite them in to eat, as that was how I was raised. My mother had to leave town for a few days and my dad and I ate early and set the plates on the floor for the dog. This was kind of unusual, but not unknown. It was scraps in the bowl, and these were pure white correlation plates and the dog was licking them spotless. Sure enough, the neighbors knocked on the back door. My dad looked at me and said, "Don't say a damn thing." Answers the door, tells them to come in, and we just ate. Would you like coffee? After a bit, he reaches down for the plates on the floor, casually stacks them and puts them back in the cabinet, and a horrified expression appeared on their faces and they said they had to get back home for a phone call. They left and my dad laughed about it for 30 minutes while we washed all the dishes in that cabinet. He threatened my life if I ever told my mom. Lived there for 10 plus years, and the neighbors never came over again, even for coffee. Story 70. I think I was like 9 and was going to spend the night at a neighbor's house. They had a daughter who was 11 and a son who was 8. I had played a lot with these kids around the neighborhood, but he never spent the night. There were many red flags that my parents should have seen before letting me stay. First, they left the oven on with the door open to heat the house. Next, the mom had a sign on the door that said, "I gotta get paid if you wanna get laid." Well, I had no idea what laid meant, so I didn't think it was odd, until later in life. There was also a door on the side of the house that we couldn't use because it was for her, quote, friends only. The porch light for this door was bright red, which I thought was cool. We ate toast with sugar on it for dinner and each got our very own 2 liters of Mountain Dew. The boy and I were staying in one room and the girl was in hers. Late at night, I heard the boy get up and go into the closet and was just standing in there. I asked what he was doing. He said he didn't want to walk to the bathroom, so he pees in the closet. I told him I won't be doing that. So he went and told his mom I was the one peeing in his closet. He definitely had been using his closet as a urinal for years, but his mom didn't care and blamed me. I walked home in the middle of the night and told my parents what happened. They didn't seem shocked or anything. Kinda makes me mad that they knew what was going on over there, but still let me spend the night. Story 71. I was maybe 10 when I went to sleepover at my best friend's house. Things were normal at first. We played games, watched TV, played on her dad's work computer. It was great. As all good things do, the fun ended the moment my friend's older brother got home. I always thought her brother was cool because he was maybe 5-ish years older than us. My opinion changed rather quickly after this visit. At first, her brother kept standing behind us while we were sitting on their couch. Weird, but okay. Then he began asking my friend to come into his room. My friend kept saying no and rolling her eyes. Okay then. I tried to ignore this too, even though my little alarm bells were going off. Thanks, Mom, for raising me on the Cops TV show. Eventually, the brother gave up this tactic and decided to switch it up, I guess. I remember he first asked my friend if she would come into his room for $10. My friend said no. Her brother upped the offer to $15. Again, my friend said no. So her brother turned to me and offered me the $15 to go to his room instead. My mind was blown. $15 seemed like a crap ton of money to my child brain. But again, my little alarms were still ringing. Before I could answer, my friend looks me dead in the eyes and tells me I'll regret it if I go into her brother's room. I was freaked the hell out. Her brother stormed off to his room and I figured maybe that was the last we'd see of him for the evening. But no, that would have been too easy. The universe couldn't have that. After my friend's mom made us dinner, I needed to go to the restroom. As I was doing my thing in there, I noticed the doorknob start to jiggle a little bit. Being the innocent child I was, I thought someone needed to use the restroom, so I yelled that the restroom was occupied. That didn't stop the doorknob from jiggling, though. I was starting to sweat. I have no idea how long that went on for, but at the time, it felt like forever. Suddenly, I heard shouting from the other side of the door. My friend's mom went to check on me and saw her son standing in front of the door. Needless to say, I called my mom immediately after I came out of the restroom and went home. It wasn't until I was older that I happened to remember this. Maybe I was overreacting, but those two incidents alone freaked me out and I stayed away from my friend's house. Story 72. A new family moved to our small town. It was a big deal because 1, the dad was the new superintendent, 2, they had 12 kids, 3, they were moving into the smallest house on a farm property. I think only like 5 of the kids were still living at home, but I don't know. This house was more of a shack than an actual house. I think maybe 2 small bedrooms upstairs. Well, the child in my class had invited me out for a sleepover. I was probably in 5th grade at the time. The house was disgusting. I remember sitting at the table and the mom sat there while we ate with her forehead down on the table the entire time. I was so homesick. But it got really weird when the dad got home. Our superintendent, remember. He ate a reheated plate and as he ate, the kids were to bathe. They took turns bathing in the same tub of water, eventually asking if I wanted to take a bath. I'm sure I've never shaken my head so fast. I remember seeing the brown water in the very small tub. I was then horrified when the dad/our superintendent went in for his bath and shut the door. The image of what he must have looked like sitting down into a very small tub of brown, cold water scarred me. Later, the crabby mom was leaving to town. She told us we had to have the house clean before she got back, or I had to go home. I should have immediately set about the task of making a mess to ensure my ticket home, but for some odd reason I didn't. The house was an absolute pit. I remember one of the older sisters pushing everything on the floor upstairs like a bulldozer down the small stairwell, even pushing a mattress over top of it, and we were climbing up the stairs without ever actually touching the steps because they were filled with the junk and the junk was deep. I remember her brother's dirty underwear being in there, and a sister making him cry stringing them up in the house. We shoved stuff in every nook and cranny we could, literally just hiding everything. I'm certain it looked frightful, and that it was still not even passable for clean when she got back. I was so scared. I, quote, got to stay. That night we watched a movie, Interview with the Vampires. I never watched anything like it and it made me sick to my stomach. The sound and image of the vampires sucking the blood from dogs' necks and tossing them into a pile haunts me to this day. I also had brought a pillow that was a big goofy head. I remember having it at one point but never saw it again. My mom had even asked them for it, yet it's never been given back. The whole experience hurts my stomach. It was such a dark, dirty shack and the parents were 100% creepy. Neither ever talked directly to me. I felt so uncomfortable and scared the whole time. Why did my mom let me go there? Story 73. My fella's childhood home was absolutely filthy. Floors were originally light brown carpet, but they were a dark gray brown from never having seen a Hoover or any form of cleaning. There was spilt cereal on the floor and wall from his baby brother that I think had been left for some time. You could barely walk through the house for trash everywhere. The leather sofa was stained and sticky. The kitchen, ew. And the bathroom, my God, I used it once and nearly threw up. He also had a very abusive stepdad who was a drunk short man with a permanently red face and little man syndrome. He would beat fella's mom and fella whenever he drank, which was every night. Fella thought this was totally normal. I grew up with a strict clean freak mom and had to deep clean mom's house every day. Mom and dad worked long hard hours and it was me helping, not being forced. So I was certainly scarred seeing fella's house. We were 15 when we met, 25 now. I only went round his a couple of times after that to pick him up for a day out, but he would always come round my house. He never realized how he had been living. He would sleep over a lot. I took some pictures of his home to show my mom. She let fella sleep around and taught him cooking and cleaning and personal hygiene, showering and regular teeth brushing. I fell in love with him when I met him in school because he's funny, hot, and we have lots of interests in common. It wasn't a pity thing. It wasn't until 6 months of dating that I saw his home. He looked and acted perfectly normal in school. You'd never have known. Now he's a great cook, likes our home clean, not to my standards, but my standards are a lot for most people. A fantastic dad, hates alcohol, and just a great man. Stepdad is out of the picture now, but the house remains the same. We've gone round and deep cleaned many times, but it always goes back to before. He says he just doesn't remember it being bad growing up. I remind him it's the same from when I first met him, and he can't believe he found it normal, as he agrees his mom's place with his little brother and sister is horrid. Story 74. Grew up in part in the country, where you had very little choice as to who your friends were, just whoever lived in the local area, and in my age group there were very few girls. 2 of my female friends were in the same family, and they were not from a great family. Like, my family is screwed up, but their family was next level. Their parents were alcoholics and drug addicts on the dole, welfare. They had a little barrel in their kitchen, and every payday their mom would go to the $2 bargain store and buy a trolley full of lollies and junk food and just dump the food in the barrel. That was their food for the next fortnight, and it would be gone within 2 days because they had like 8 kids. They'd often come to school without food, and one of the lovely teachers would bring them packed lunches every day just in case, quote, they forgot their lunch. One day, for some unknown reason, my mom decided to let my brother and I go over to their place to play. They had a caravan in their backyard which the kids played in. It was trashed, covered with graffiti and a literal crap. Like human turds. When we asked about it, the kids brushed it off like it was normal, before their younger brother proceeded to demonstrate live. Later on, we were kicking a ball around in the backyard. My brother booted the ball into a tree by accident. All of the kids suddenly got really scared and one yelled, "Careful, that's Dad's special tree!" On closer inspection, my brother and I realized it was a pot tree, like a thick freaking tree with giant buds. Our parents were hippies, so we knew what it was. The whole day was absolutely bizarre. My mom never let us go back there again when we got home and told her about it. Fun times. Just tiny little side note, shout out to those teachers who would bring them lunches. Absolute saints. I hope all those kids are doing at least all right now. 8 kids too, yikes. You'd think after you can't really support, the 5th, 6th, hell, maybe the 3rd, you'd stop. Story 75. The mother beating the crap out of the kids. Not so much as like little kids, but like 13 to 16-year-olds, so still kids. Later I learned by having a bunch of friends that are from islands, Islanders, Micronesians, Samoans, Tongans, etc. Turns out islands, specifically Samoans and Tongans, their parents literally beat the crap out of the kids to keep them in line. Girls, boys, doesn't matter. Whatever's close is a weapon, usually a shoe or some sort of cooking utensil in the kitchen. I'm not talking a swat on the butt or a dress down, I'm talking straight up giving them the business. Not one swing, not a half-hearted swing, no half-stepping bullcrap. I'm talking mom was like an ex-MMA fighter whose parents were probably the same lineage and beat the crap out of her and her siblings. So it continues and the kids get their butts straight up kicked. However, the family was always nice and the kids were, obviously the kids were very well-mannered, of course, until the mother or father found out that they did something wrong. Come home late, got in trouble with the cops, found some weed on them, got caught smoking cigarettes. Or one beating I saw was because the younger of the brothers was caught with betel nut and had like a stash of all the things used to chew it. A few cigarettes, some leaves of some kind, betel nuts that were fresh. So he obviously went to the local Asian market and purchased them there. The knives or razors to cut the betel nut, the like crushed up coral mixed with something to make sort of paste, and everything else needed in his little stash box he made a hiding place in his room for. All of this was forbidden in the household until a certain age or just period, no questions asked. Anyway, betel nut is some sort of local to them, like chew. It's this hard green nut, fresh, that you slice like 4 times, then take a piece of it, along with a bit of loose tobacco from a cigarette, some of that coral paste stuff, and then wrap it up in this leaf thing. Put in mouth. Over time, it screws your teeth way up and can turn your lips red. Never have seen this. But once I looked it up, you see pictures of women on the islands with blood-red lips from the betel nut chewing/chewage. Anyway, Mom made him make one for him and all his siblings, not all of which imbibed in this stuff, and then chew it for a long time. Huge servings while this was happening. She beat a few of the kids' butts like punches and kicks. And then once she got to the culprit, it was one of the sickest beatdowns with a shoe I've personally ever seen. Not the Boomerang Eddie Murphy stand-up style beatdown, no. Beatdown like this kid stole your money, murdered your dog, burnt your house down, or some other felonious crime you'd think. bruises, and lots of holy craps from me, said internally as I sort of backed away from the action and just watched in horror. After it was done, everyone went about their business like a normal freaking day. Later on, it turns out these beatings happened a lot if the kids stepped out of line, of which there were many times, so many beatdowns. Funny thing is, Samoans and Islanders in general that I've known have always been some of the most loving, generous, honest, loyal, friendliest, and soft-spoken people, of which many I consider great and close friends, ones that would always be there in a pinch. Always put family first, and friends, if you were close enough, were like family. They would do anything for you, and I in turn did the same because people like that with morals and general ideals are few and far between. Soft-spoken, but also, when crap hit the fan, some of the biggest Islanders I knew were the first to stand up, ready to step in front of me or whoever was being bullied and challenged, and would straight up stomp the crap out of people. And then, hey bro, let's go get a beer or some food, in the sweetest, softest voice you've ever heard. So maybe as a parent I'm doing it wrong since these kids obeyed their parents like they were the damn KGB or Mossad or something. If they breached the line or protocol, they would get dealt with almost ASAP. Almost to the point of going home just to get the butt whooping and get it over with. Great people, weird upbringing violence, and even the girls got their butts kicked. But not only being some of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen, they're kick-ass people and great friends. Also could fight with the best of them. And I've even seen a girl put a guy down with a few quick punches, and again, the group I was with, this was normal. While the guy who was being a jerk and put his hands on the girl while trying to spit some game, touching, not wanted, got what he deserved. This sounds like a beating your kids sort of pitch. I don't know if I love that. I would personally hazard to guess that the beatings as children and being great, wonderful, loving, kind people aren't, directly related. I don't think that's the takeaway from this. Story 76. My friend always told me his house was haunted. I never really gave it much thought, but one night he and his family had a barbecue, so everyone was in the backyard, and family and close friends could use the bathroom in the house. Other guests, the one in the basement, which was actually closer and easier to get to from the backyard, just not the most comfortable. Anyway, I'm in the house by myself and I'm walking through the kitchen to go out to the backyard. Out of the corner of my eye, I see someone sitting in a chair, watching me. I turned to see who it was, and no one was there. I turned back to continue and I felt the feeling of being watched. And in the reflection of the window, I once again saw someone sitting in the same chair I just passed by. I turned to look again, nothing. I went outside almost white as a ghost myself, poured myself another drink, sat down quietly for a few minutes, still kind of feeling watched. I told my friend and he said, sounds about right. The next time I was there, I had absolutely no experiences, no feelings of being watched, nothing, when I fully expected it. I mentioned that to my friend and his response was, you showed you belong here, so no one has to watch you in the family house. Never going to forget that night, though. Story 77. My house has always been full of these. We've always been the weird family. My mom grew up as a missionary in Africa, so she grew up with a thrifty attitude and never saw much need for air conditioning, even though we live in the southern US. To this day, I don't really use my AC. It feels weird to me. People get really sweaty at my house. I turn it on when we have company these days. Having working parents, I never really learned much about table etiquette. I'm far from helpless in the kitchen because I've always loved watching Food Network/Food YouTube, but I'm still getting used to forks and knives at the age of 20. My dad has a pet goat that he has, so he doesn't need a lawnmower. It's surprisingly effective. Our house has books on every wall. My mom is an English teacher and regularly comes home with a double-digit quantity. She's read them all. My room has a ton of books as well, and I've read more than most of my friends, but less than I'm satisfied with. In 8th grade, I opted to get rid of my mattress in favor of a pile of blankets. I toss and turn a lot. I started using a mattress again towards the end of my first year in community college. Story 78. Here's mine. In my teens, I go hang out at a friend's house that I've hung out with quite a bit, but never eaten dinner with them. It's getting time and the mom asks me if I'll stay for dinner. They're old hippies, the parents, and while they're quite quirky and a little messy, they're pretty normal, and we all got along great. Dinner is served. Lemon chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans. Very normal for an American family. We sit down and I notice there's no silverware, not a fork in sight. The whole family starts eating with their hands, picking up chicken, not strange in itself in my opinion, fingering through green beans, and get this, shoveling mashed potatoes with their fingers. So I ask if they have a fork, and they all look at each other like I've sprouted another head. The mom says, "You don't need to get silverware dirty, dear. God gave you perfectly adequate hands to eat with." I just ate the easy stuff and lied and said I was allergic to potatoes. Not the strangest thing and nowhere near the grossest. from the list of horrors I've read in this thread, but I do remember noting that none of them even washed their hands before digging in. On a side note, this family had a huge wall-to-wall fish tank in their tank room that held 2 full-grown electric eels. I was told they shorted out the tank electrics several times, and there were boxes of extra tank stuff like pumps and lights unopened next to the tank. For some reason, the germy hand food stands out to me as strange, but the eels were just cool. Story 79. A loving family. Going to my friend's home, I always remember I was shocked when their mother would make us food, when their family would say they loved each other casually, when their brothers and sisters would be nice to them. I constantly felt like I'd been lied to my whole life. At home, everyone was always cold. My brother never hugged me or said anything nice to me. I wasn't bullied at school, but my brother always found the best name to call me in order to make me feel like trash. My mother protected him and was constantly arguing with my father. My father cheated on her dozens of times, to the point of me knowing about this when I was 7, without anyone telling me. Whenever they had a fight, he would just leave for days without saying anything, and I remember my mom crying. We never had a good family moment. No one ever says they love the other. We do love each other, very much, but we're cold about it. My mother has attempted to say she loves us more often, but I find it awkward and weird, so I find it super hard to say I love her back, although I do. I even have a very bad feeling about touch. I hate being hugged or touched in general because no one at home used to do that. So whenever I went to my friends' homes, I was baffled by any demonstration of love. I guess it's normal, but it was definitely not normal to me. Story 80. So since I was in the first generation with basically unlimited access to the internet, technology was a big thing in my elementary to middle school years. I was too early for the sticky diaper-wearing, iPad-wielding, Cocomelon-watching preschooler, but I was there to at least have a cell phone by 7th grade. I remember going to my friend's house for a sleepover and walking into his house. Seemed normal, except there was no TV in the living room, no clocks, no microwave, the lights were off, etc. Now when this kid would come to my house, he would be enamored with everything relating to video games and just technology, and I never knew why. Hell, this kid beat Skyrim on my Xbox at my house over the years we hung out. But going to his house for the first time, I found out why. His mother was a psychopath who despised technology. She took my phone the instant I walked into the house, and told me I could get my one-way ticket to hell back when I left. So the sleepover was super boring. Just me and this kid cycling through his board game collection as he kept repeatedly apologizing to me, saying this is why I never invite you over. And saying, I hate her more than you, believe me. But then I remember leaving the next day and forgetting my phone. So me and my mom drove back over to their house and I told her about how crazy her mom was and that I didn't want to talk to her. To be honest, I was kind of scared of her. My mother was getting out of the car and said, how bad could she be? Then 10 minutes later, yes, 10 minutes I counted, she gets back in the car, gives me my phone, and curses at her under her breath. I asked her what happened. Apparently this woman lectured my mom about how dangerous technology is, how it can ruin the mind of an innocent child. We were in 8th grade, not completely innocent anymore, and blah blah blah. The kid never really talked to me much anymore, and we kinda grew apart in high school. Then here's a bonus of what ended up happening to the kid in high school. Became a mound of pure angst against his mother. Got a job, bought an Xbox and a cell phone, high treason against his mother. Started taking drugs, got kicked out at 17. Didn't graduate. I'd like to think it was more the mother's fault than the kid's at the end of the day. I'm with OP here. I think it was definitely more the mother's fault. Turns out that level of repression produces a pretty nasty rebound effect, huh? And I guarantee you the mother justifies it by saying, oh, it was when he got all this fancy stuff that he went to the dark side. I don't know why I said dark side like it's Star Wars or something, but you get what I mean. An unfortunate way to grow up, for sure. Story 81. In elementary school at a sleepover, my friend and his younger brother caught some June bugs and blew them up in the microwave to entertain the 3 or 4 of us that were staying over. Needless to say, it was unsupervised. We were aged 8 to 10 years old, with the younger brother around 6 to 8. House was always a mess. Every 90s toy you can imagine just strewn all around the downstairs and upstairs of the house. I think we all just sat and watched the spoiled fart older brother play Zelda for a dumb amount of time. We got restless. At this point, I don't think I had seen a parent for 3 to 4 hours. It was dinner time, easily around 6 or 7. Suddenly, the fart brothers quit entertaining the guest with their single-player video game skills and yelled something about eating some damn food. We all run to the defunct kitchen and wait to see what we're having for dinner. No adults. Just 5 or 6 kids kind of scrambling around to find dinner. I'm just standing there because I don't know what kind of food they have. The fart bros pull some frozen hot dogs and frozen waffles out. I'm down. I like both of those, but we kind of destroyed the microwave like 5 hours ago. Hey, no big deal. The stinky boys just rip into the frozen food like it's carrot sticks and frozen waffles. Astonished, I watched until the only form of nutrition in the kitchen quickly disappeared before my eyes. I grabbed a dog and sunk my teeth in. It tasted like a hot dog ice cube, so I told them I needed to call my parents. I think the mom showed up at some point to try and dissuade me with some Captain Crunch. No milk, though. Spent a lot of other weird nights there. Story 82. Myself and my brother stayed over at an uncle's house with my cousins one weekend while my parents were in London. I was about 8. Their house was just on the other end of our street. First thing I found weird at the time was an older man lived with them. My uncle was about 40 and this man was in his late 60s. I was later to discover that this man was my uncle's lover but was kept secret. This was around 1990. Next, each of my 3 cousins had their own bedroom, which was great, but it was a 3-bedroom house, just like our own. The bathroom was made into a bedroom. We had to go outside in a newly built outhouse to use the toilet. But what really freaked me out on the Sunday, a big metal bath would come out of the cupboard and they would all have their weekly baths. Same water and everything. Thankfully, I'd already had my daily shower. I just used the shower at my house because I had a key. I told my parents when they got back, and my dad said it was actually the same metal bath him and my uncles and aunts would use every Sunday night growing up in the early 50s. Times change, but some families don't. Story 83. I befriended the sheriff's stepkid when I was a preteen. For some reason, they had a lot of money but lived on the poor side of town. Needless to say, he had more than I did. My family was poor, so I was there all the time. He did some weird crap, always with some frisky twist. His family bred Boston Terriers. They were sweet dogs, but my friend would abuse the dogs with the end of a fly swatter like it was no big deal and even funny. I was disturbed. This house was as toxic of an environment as you could imagine. Once there was a pool party where my friend's older brother stripped me of my clothes as justification for my presence there. In the pool as a preteen, I watched my friend's mom screw a high schooler in every corner of the pool. It was surreal. I cannot even fathom anyone getting away with that crap today. My friend's sheriff's stepdad died of cancer shortly after that party. My friend was so screwed up from the time I knew him. I have tons of stories. He introduced me to alcohol, smoking, weed, banging, intimate toys, adult films, so much crap that seemed matter-of-fact to him. Of course, he got caught up in hard drugs as we were from a heavy opioid and ice area. He had all the NES games too, even the rare crap like Baby Mario. Why did OP choose to end with the NES game thing? I just got full-on whiplash. It's like, yeah, that's pretty weird, Baby Mario? Huh? Story 84. In grade 9, I had a buddy whose house was the definition of hoarders. When you entered that house, you stepped into a living room that literally had pathways around dirty laundry, books, bags of trash, boxes. You'd step into the den and there were piles of comics, more books, boxes, and records. The kitchen was extremely small and had dishes precariously stacked on every inch of the counter, and the floor filled with garbage bags that reeked of compost. The inside of the fridge stained from years of spills, leaks, sprays, residue. The bottom of the fridge was so overcome by mold, it looked like some kind of Lovecraftian portal was forming from the depths of the bottom drawers. Anyway, one time we were walking around and he needed to pop into his house to get something. He asked our other friend who had never been into his house if he'd like to come in. He said, sure. 10 minutes later, they walk out. My other buddy looks like he'd just been shown a glimpse of hell. Hey man, are you okay? He took me into his parents' room and showed me his mom's toy collection. He touched them. He handed me one. I think I'm gonna go home, dude. Poor guy. Story 85. Can I spin this and say, my amazing group of friends got to see the full weird and dysfunction at my house? I grew up in a small, amazing community. Basically, the same 35 kids who graduated high school together were the same kids that started pre-K together, and 30 years later, we're still mostly friends. I had a middle school Halloween party at my house. All the boys stayed the night, and the girls came from like 4 to 9 p.m. My girlfriend at the time was one of the first to leave. My parents normally stayed upstairs while we ate, danced, listened to music, watched movies, played video games downstairs, whatever. It was wholesome. The kids were mostly family at that point in our childhoods. Anyway, my girlfriend leaves a bit early, and for some reason, my alcoholic, abusive father is downstairs. He yells at me saying, "You walk her out, boy." And I replied, she's already gone. At which point, he pushes through a sea of kids with raging, locked intent in his eyes, yelling and screaming. He reaches me and backhands me hard enough to send me crashing into a room divider where I lay like a pretzel for a few seconds. I pop up, smile, and start dancing so my friends aren't startled. My girlfriends, just actual female friends, were crying. They called their parents to go home. My guy friends were mad and wanted to fight him. I just kept snacking and acting like it was normal because, well, sadly it was at my house. I was that weird kid that tried to play off dysfunction like it was normal about 35 years ago, but grew up to break that cycle, and my own kids, nearing adulthood, have never seen anger, rage, or hate from their father. Story 86. I once spent the night in a girl's house who lived next to my grandma. We were definitely under 13, probably between 8 to 10 at the time. I only ever saw the girl when I visited my grandma a few times a year. Anyway, I distinctly remember when it was time to go to bed being told by her parents that they would have to lock us into her bedroom so her 2 younger brothers couldn't get in. There was a lock really high up on the outside of the door that only the adults could reach. I remember being really weirded out by this, and not liking the idea that I had no choice on when I could leave the room. What if I woke up at night and had to go pee? The girl told me to just go in a bucket. That freaked me out even more, but the girl acted like it was totally normal and I was too nervous to say anything, so I just dealt with it and decided to stay anyway. Nothing bad happened, but it definitely creeped me out and I was uncomfortable. I remember waking up early in the morning and having to use the bucket since the parents still weren't awake. The girl didn't wake up for a while either, so I just sat next to her window, staring outside and considering stepping out onto the roof to escape, because I was scared the adults would forget we were locked in her room and never let us out. Story 88. This was actually at my house, but I doubt my childhood friends are on Reddit. If they are, well, hello. 1. We had a giant pile of tires, like huge, behind our house. Not quite in our backyard, because we had a little extra piece of land, because my father would steal some from car mechanic shops and try to resell them. Me and my friends would play on them and even roll around in them. 2. My crazy father who stole tires used to be chased by the police. He would run inside and make a sandwich before being arrested. 3. Most of my house was unfinished, like bare floors, because my dad ripped out the carpet and then didn't have enough money to fix it, or went to jail before he could. 4. We had a giant hole in the corner of our ceiling from the time my adult sister fell through the attic. And 5. I'm not sure how crazy this was, but it sure was fun. We had a huge 4-car garage that was separate from our house, and it was filled with so much stuff, either stolen or given to us by my now dead grandparents. Some things included tires, skis, a lot of tables and chairs, which we used for Pokemon battles, broken pools, and much more. Story 89. When I was in elementary school, 3rd grade maybe, I went to a classmate's birthday party, one of the parties where the entire class was invited. This was a classmate who always sat alone at lunch. I have a very vivid memory of me sitting down on the other end of the lunch table from them, watching them take out a sandwich with only ketchup between 2 pieces of white bread, filling it with potato chips and proceeding to eat it. Looking back, it's all a bit sad, but I thought said classmate was odd and I didn't want to go to the party. My mom insisted and I went anyway. I was one of the first to arrive, and the way my classmate's dad acted stuck with me to this day. He was holding a large puppet of Fozzie Bear from the Muppets, and would only speak through the puppet. No one else was allowed to touch the puppet but him. I vaguely remember asking the classmate if this was a regular thing for him, and they said it was. So this wasn't just an act Dad put on for the party. I also remember said classmate's room was covered in dirty dishes, huge stacks of them all over the floor. That's all I remember from that party though. I hope they're doing okay today. Story 90. This one still bothers me to this day because I can barely make sense of it. I used to date this girl when I was 19. Very pretty and normal looking, kind of like a blonde Victoria Justice. Her parents left for a trip to Paris, so she called me to come over. I've met her parents before for dinner at a restaurant and they seemed very normal. Almost Flanders-like in how nice they were, but not religious. It was my first time being over at their house. Again, very normal looking and clean. Everything was well kept and organized. Anyway, we do what 2 teenagers do when left alone, and after she had to go shower and clean up. However, I was holding on from pooping because when you're 19, your excitement overrides all other impulses. So I had to look for another bathroom I could take a dump into while she was showering. I figure I could do a stealth dump in her parents' master bedroom bathroom across the hall since they're gone for weeks anyway. However, when I opened the bathroom door, I was greeted by an overwhelming stench of crap. Worse than a non-maintained public toilet. The bathtub was filled with crap. I only glanced at it for a split second, but it was like that bathtub in Silence of the Lambs, but with lots of floating solid crap. At that point, I really don't feel like crapping anymore, and I'm resisting vomiting. To this day, it still haunts my nightmares, and I can never forget the smell. I thought maybe the pipes had burst and it leaked into the tub, but when I told her that, she just did a long sigh and sat me down. She said it's something her mother did. She would collect her crap in the tub and they would just leave the exhaust fans on, and that master bedroom bathroom door closed all the time. Her mother literally piled poop in the tub for some reason, and the entire family accepted this like it was part of her process. I just pretended to accept it, of course, because she was hot, and just nodded that I understood that it was some sort of compulsion, although I think she knew I was definitely weirded out by it, and we eventually broke up a few months later. That was the only time I've been to their house, and I've tried avoiding dinner invites because I don't think I can look her mother in the eye. Story 91. There were lots of bizarre things I noticed the night I stayed over at my friend's house for the first time. First of all, their mom screamed at them over every little thing. It got exhausting to listen to. I saw her mom force one of her little brothers to eat a spoonful of hot sauce mixed with dish soap because he said shut up to his older brother. They drank milk with their savory dinner, which I thought was disgusting. Bedtime was at like 7 p.m. Before bedtime, she made all three of the brothers take baths, but they all shared the same bathwater. Thankfully, I didn't have to take one. After about an hour of laying on my friend's floor wide awake, just weirded out by the entire day, I faked I had a stomach ache and had them call my mom to pick me up. It was all just too much for me. So most things here, OP, are concerning, if not just a little gross. But, and maybe this is just because I can't drink milk, but drinking milk with savory dinner is unusual, sure, but does it deserve to be in the same list as forcing a child to eat a spoonful of hot sauce and dish soap? I don't know. Seems like a different sort of level. Anyway, that was the last story for today. I know it's been a while since I've been on the channel. I've been sick, sorry. Hopefully you'll be hearing more of me though. For now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.